There's an incredible 36 watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show. We're on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, after a damning report into the NHS, today Sir Keir Starmer claimed the NHS must reform or die. So the topic of our big debate today is simply this. Is it time to do the unthinkable and privatise the NHS? We'll speak to health carers on both sides of the fence. And in a tough new clampdown on second jobs, the Labour Party is threatening to kick MPs like Nigel Farage and Lee Anderson off of GB News. Is this fair, or is it a clampdown on political free speech? I'll be joined in the studio exclusively by Lee Anderson shortly for a big debate with somebody who disagrees with him completely. And next up, Labour's new renters reform bill could push up rents by 10%, according to a shock new report from the National Landlords Association. Might giving more power to tenants spectacularly backfire. And today, a GB News exclusive report has identified a map of shame of how MPs voted to kill the winter fuel allowance versus their thin margins. Today, we'll exclusively reveal which MPs in Britain are the most at risk of losing their seats to old age protesters. And have our Royal Navy simply gone way too woke? That's all coming up in your next hour. Always a show, always a pleasure to have your company. So the winter fuel allowance is something, as you will know, we've been pushing hard on the show ever since that vote came out. 348 votes against to kill the bill, all of them the Labour Party. Today, we've produced an exclusive map showing who voted, how and where, and what are the size of their margins. Could this bill backfire on those Labour MPs with thin margins? 15 votes decided some of those seats versus thousands and thousands in those very same seats that lost their winter fuel allowance. You'll not want to miss it. Plus, over there, Lee Anderson has just hoved into view. He's in fighting form. They're trying to think about getting him off on GB News. And also, Nigel Farage. Is that fair? Get ready for a big ding-dong on that. But first, it's time for your headlines, and here's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you and good afternoon to you. It's just after 3 o'clock and the top story today, Sir Keir Starmer has said the NHS is broken but not beaten, delivering a stark message after a damning report into the health service. Lord Darcy's rapid review highlights rising demand, low productivity and poor morale, just some of the major challenges facing the health service. It's after figures out this morning showed ballooning waiting times and delays in A&E and in cancer care. Well, speaking earlier, the Prime Minister warned there'd be no more money without reform and said big shifts are needed to secure the NHS's future.
Only fundamental reform and a plan for the long term can turn around the NHS and build a healthy society. Now, it won't be easy, it won't be quick, it will take a 10-year plan, not just the work of one Parliament, but I know we can do it.
However, the Conservatives say it's time for the Labour Party to turn rhetoric into action, and earlier Shadow Health Secretary Victoria Adkins told us she's concerned by the government's slow steps at tackling the healthcare crisis.
I'm concerned because the first action of this government was to allow a budget-busting pay rise for junior doctors with no productivity forms attached. And they are also, I hear, going to cancel the productivity plan that I was bringing forward for technology. And if that is what they're doing, then that is of concern because I fear we're in for an even rougher ride.
The UK's Police and Crime Minister has had her belongings stolen from a hotel where she was giving a speech to members of the Police Superintendents Association. In that conference speech, Dame Diana Johnson said the Labour government had inherited an epidemic of antisocial behaviour, of theft and shoplifting from the Conservative government. Warwickshire Police are now investigating that incident, and the Home Office has confirmed that no security risks were identified. Martin's Law, named after 29-year-old Martin Hett, who was one of the 22 people killed in the Manchester Arena bombing, has been introduced to Parliament today. The new legislation aims to strengthen public protection against terrorism, and under the law venues could be fined up to £18 million if they fail to adopt actions like training their staff or improving security protocols. The law will fulfil the Prime Minister's promise to Martin's mother, Figan Murray, to bring in that law after her tireless campaigning. A Royal Navy warship has seized £160 million worth of cocaine in the Caribbean, intercepting a so-called narco sub in a joint operation with the United States. HMS Trent, sailing around 200 miles south of the Dominican Republic, seized 2,000 kilos of the drug, marking the ship's 8th drug bust in 7 months. Commander Tim Langford praised his crew for their efforts battling what he called difficult conditions to make that historic haul. The National Crime Agency has seized hundreds of dangerous life jackets that were destined for criminal gangs smuggling migrants across the Channel. The NCA, working with Dutch and Italian authorities, intercepted the faulty jackets in the Netherlands. The inflatable life jackets wouldn't have worked in the deep water, they say, and were intended for small boat crossings and included some children's sizes. A 23-year-old lorry driver has been arrested as part of that investigation. In a sign that major changes could be ahead for the UK's workforce, health and care worker visa applications have plunged by 83% from April to August of this year. New figures from the Home Office reveal dependent visa applications also dropped by 73%. Meanwhile, student visas saw a 17% drop. Dependent students who took a sharper hit with 83% decline. In contrast, though, applications for skilled worker visas rose by 18% over the same period. Data centres will be classified as critical national infrastructure to protect against cyber attacks and possible IT blackouts, the government's announced today. The facilities store vital data from NHS records to smartphone photos and financial information. Their new status puts data centres now on par with water, energy and with emergency services, making sure there's greater government support to fend off possible cyber threats or outages. And the move coincides with the proposed multi-billion-pound investment in Hertfordshire to build Europe's largest data centre, creating over 700 local jobs. And finally, taking space exploration to new heights, 2 civilians have completed the first ever commercial spacewalk today. Billionaire Jared Isaacman and crewmate Sarah Gillis floated out from their SpaceX Dragon capsule some 400 miles above Earth using experimental spacesuits. Well, without the usual safety of an airlock, the daring duo tested life support systems in the vacuum of space, and that privately funded mission made them the first to take a cosmic stroll without being professional astronauts. Now, though, the hatch is closed and the pair are safely back inside. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'll be back with you for another update in around half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to the show. Got loads to get into. Let's get cracking. Now, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has said that the NHS must reform or die. A shocking report by former Labour Health Minister Lord Darzi has described the state of the NHS as dire and in critical condition. And the report finds that failings in care has led to the deaths of thousands of patients every year.
Big picture finding is the NHS is in a serious, critical condition. But the vital signs are normal, which will suggest that we can do something about this. To do it well, we need to engage the whole staff, patients, the public, the political leadership, all aligned to make that change happen as quickly as we can, because we can't wait.
Keir Starmer made a speech earlier on the biggest reimagining of the NHS, whatever that means, later on in the morning, where he will say that funding will be moved away from unproductive hospitals. Well, GB News' political correspondent Olivia Utley joins us now. Olivia, welcome to the show. So the NHS is in dire need of reform and we simply cannot keep on throwing money at it. So Keir Starmer sounding exactly like a Conservative Prime Minister should have sounded.
Well, absolutely, and it is actually something we did hear from Conservative ministers over the last 14 years. The Labour government is hopeful, and I think some Conservatives are hopeful as well, that Labour will be in a better position to commit to this reform of the NHS, because for Labour, the NHS is a less politically toxic issue than for the Conservatives. If you remember, in the run-up to the 2017 and 2019 general elections, Jeremy Corbyn was always accusing the Conservatives of wanting to privatise our NHS. There was a hands off our NHS slogan. Politically, it might be slightly easier for Labour to get to grips with this sort of reform. But, of course, there is always the problem of the unions. Keir Starmer said today that there can be no more money without reform. Now, that is a really, really bold statement. It's probably a sensible statement because if you look into the figures, personnel in the NHS increased by 17% between 2012 and 2019, but the number of operations actually being done every year didn't go up at all. So there is clearly a productivity crisis within the NHS. That means that personnel issues really need to be addressed, but that will put Keir Starmer at odds with the unions, the BMA in particular. And of course, Keir Starmer has just given an enormous pay rise to junior doctors in order to placate the BMA. I asked him that question earlier today. Let's see what he had to say.
Professor John Bell said this morning that doctors in the BMA have been a major drag on reforming healthcare. Do you predict that the BMA will now embrace productivity reform with open arms?
Well, look, I've said we'll do this with the staff, and we will. But I know from my old job running the Crown Prosecution Service that whenever you try to reform anything, there will be some people, I'm afraid, who will say, oh, don't do that, it's better as it is, I wouldn't do that. Keep things as they are. We have to take that attitude on, in my view. It's an inhibitor of change. So whilst we say we will do it with people, and we will, do it together, and we will, I know in my heart of hearts we will meet pockets of people who will say, don't do it, slow down, go over there, not over there, leave things as they are. We have to take that on, and we will take that on. That's part and parcel of the change that we need to bring about. Thank you.
So Keir Starmer sounding very bullish there, prepared to take on the unions, brace for a fight, saying he can't be doing with the sort of attitude that will stop reform. But let's see what actually happens when push comes to shove. In my mind, this might be the sticking point that stops Labour being able to get through these drastic reforms to the NHS. Another issue for the Labour Party could be the short-term solutions. Keir Starmer was talking today about major surgery rather than sticking plaster solutions. He talked about a grand 10-year plan for the NHS. But what will happen this winter when inevitably there is a winter crisis in the NHS? What will he tell those patients who are waiting on hospital trolleys that in 10 years' time their problems will be fixed? He says that we've got to be long-termist rather than short-termist, but with a short-term calamity every year, that's easier said than done.
Well, Olivia Ridley, Sir Keir Starmer saying he's going to stand up to the unions, saying we simply can't keep throwing money at it forever. No more money unless there's reform. He sounds, to be fair, like he's grasping the nettle, so taking on a big task. And well done for getting a question there to the Prime Minister from GB News. Olivia Ridley, superb start to the show. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, Nigel Farage could be banned from hosting his GB News show, with Labour eyeing up a crackdown on MPs making paid media appearances. Now, Parliament's Modernisation Committee, which is being chaired by Labour frontbencher Lucy Powell, today published a memorandum agreeing to look at tightening Lee Anderson and, of course, GB News presenter. So, for a long time, they've been eyeing up second jobs on parliamentarians, full stop. But in this instance, do you think this is actually something else, a targeted attack to silence people like you and Nigel Farage?
I think, Martin, to be honest, this is more sinister. We've seen this new Modernisation Committee set up. Some people may say it may be like a kangaroo court. I think it's got 9 Labour MPs, 3 Conservatives, 2 Lib Dems. Funnily enough, not one single Reform UK member of Parliament is allowed to go on these committees. They're going to make decisions that affect all of us in Parliament, and it's chaired by a cabinet member as well, which is unheard of for a select committee. It appears that, you know, GB News is coming for a lot of flack early doors. It still does from Ofcom and the left. They don't want this station to exist. They don't want Reform UK to exist. You know, like I said, we're not on any select committees in Parliament. They're trying to shut us down at every opportunity. One of the best platforms we have got, which is GB News, and I think we're quite impartial, to be honest, on our shows, especially Nigel. I mean, he's great. A decent platform like this, and what are they trying to do? They're trying to shut us down. They're trying to silence us. But this country, this great country of ours, Martin, will not tolerate this. We had over 4 million voters at the last election. GB News, by the way, the viewing figures and the listening figures on the radio are going up by the week. People will see through this nonsense.
A lot of people would say, though, that it's not fair, particularly for party leaders like Nigel Farage, to have a media platform. It could be a way of getting votes. That's what a lot of opponents would say. But do you think that's a fair thing? And also, there are second jobs for many, many parliamentarians of many, many different stripes. Is it going to affect everybody, or are they specifically just eyeing up those with a media platform?
Look, Martin, I mean, it is our job as politicians to get votes and to use whatever means possible to get votes, whether that's through our social media, getting out there, talking to people. But the people in this country aren't stupid. They're not daft. They make their own mind up at election time. If they want to vote for Reform, they will do. If they want to vote for the Labour Party, they will do. If they want to vote Tory, they will do. And all these people whinging on the sidelines, I think they're a little bit jealous that a station like this has really took off, and it's giving the silent majority a voice. And people like myself and Nigel and Jacob that presents on this channel, they speak to the nation, they speak to the people. There's millions of people out there that feel that they're not being listened to, and the platform we've got gives them a voice.
David Lammy, Labour now is the Foreign Secretary, who at the time he was a backbencher. He had a show on LBC. When he was elected, he stood down. Do you think you should do the same?
Who, me? Yeah. No, not at all. Like I say, it's a choice, Martin. We live in, we still live in a free country. If people don't like what I've got to say, they can switch the BBC on, or they can put ITV or Sky on. We're supposed to live in a free, democratic country where we're allowed to say, what we want to a certain extent. And, we've got to have a balance in our news. We've seen over the past, 15, 20 years, the BBC and Channel 4 and Channel 5, they've been, in my opinion, lurching to the left and not giving millions of people out there a voice. At least with GB News, you get a balance. You get balanced news reporting, you get balanced opinion, you get good debates, and people like that.
Now, you're about to go on Sky News, have the same debate. Do you think you'll get a fair hearing from them? Or do you think you get any of the kind of balance you're talking about on broadcasters like Sky or the BBC anymore?
Well, there'll be thousands of people watching this right now, Martin, so this is my chance to explain how I feel. I'm going to nip over to Sky on the Green and speak to another 25 viewers.
Lee Anderson, thank you very much for joining us in the studio, and good luck with that. And now for the counterpoint to this, I'm joined by the author and broadcaster Rebecca Reid. Rebecca, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to have your company. You just heard what Lee Anderson had to say. This is about democratic rights to free speech. What's wrong with that?
I'm sure Lee probably does think it's about that, but it's not. Nobody is stopping him from having his democratic right to have free speech. What they are considering doing is stopping him getting a big, chunky paycheck for doing additional work on the side of his proper job. Now, if you're being an MP properly, it should be incredibly demanding, which is why I actually believe MPs should maybe even be paid more. But if you're doing it properly, it should be taking up all of your time. You should not have enough time to be an MP and also be able to do a full, fast-paced media career. If this committee were to get what we think it might want, which is for MPs to not have second jobs, if Lee or Nigel or anybody else wants to do a bit of telly, they can do it for free. This is not, it's about having second jobs. If they love this so much, they can give up their free time and they can come and they can not draw a salary for it. Nobody is stopping them from being on television. What we're saying is MPs should be bound by the same strictures that almost everybody else in this country is, which is you have one job, you do that job, and you're not permitted to have loads of other jobs and moonlight elsewhere.
But, Rebecca, there are a great many MPs of all political stripes that have second jobs in a huge diversity of industries. In fact, a lot of them do that because they were very successful before they became parliamentarians and they get involved in politics almost as a second job in many senses. Are you saying then that no politician anywhere should have any form of second job at all?
Absolutely, and that I would include in that writing books. So Nadine Dorries is a fairly successful mid-range author. I'm sure she would argue that that had nothing to do with it, and in recess she wrote that in her own time. I still feel that being an MP should be one of the most important and most strenuous jobs, and therefore, when Parliament is recessed, either more time in your constituency or community work or recovering from the incredibly hard work that you've been doing, but not going out and making more money doing other things. I would include being a landlord. I would include doing any other job, including being a doctor. I don't think you can be a doctor 2 days a week and an MP the rest of it. And also, the issue with having another job is that it biases you. It means you have a conflict of interest. It means that you're hearing from one demographic of people and you have your specific sector in your ear. And that doesn't make you a neutral MP for your constituency.
OK, Rebecca, we have to leave it there. But Lee Anderson was about to leave, but he heard you. He'd like to have a quick go, because you've been accused of earning a fat chunk of money on the side.
Well, listen, I'd like to know how much this young lady pays in income tax here. I pay a lot of money, and the income tax I pay from my GB News salary actually pays for one qualified nurse every single year. That's my contribution from GB News. And she talks about, MPs not being impartial. But we're politicians, we're in political parties. I have a set of values which I stick to. Unfortunately, some constituents will never agree with me, but lots do. My vote should...
Your job is to serve the people who elected you. You are a public servant. It shouldn't be about what you want. It should be about what the people who gave you your job want.
Well, listen, let me come back on that. You know, just a couple of years back, young lady, when we had COVID on the pandemic...
Would you mind not calling me young lady? My name is Rebecca.
Is there a pronoun conflict?
Not a pronoun contact. I'm not particularly young. I'm in my 30s, and my gender is irrelevant. If you could just call me Rebecca, which is my name. I've worked on GB News for
okay then, Rebecca.
We have met each other more.
Yeah, I think what you need to do, Rebecca, is go back to bed and call for a nurse.
Hey, come on, gentlemen, let's keep
it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, Martin. This is absolutely ridiculous.
Let's keep it civil. All right, that was.
Thank you so much for that witty piece of debating. What a really clever.
All right, let's knock it on the head. Lee, Rebecca, thank you very, very much indeed for joining us on the show. Great start to the show. They're great fun. Now, moving on swiftly, it's time for the Great British Giveaway now, and the biggest cash prize we've ever given away, £36,000 could be yours, and that's tax-free. An extra $3,000 in your bank account each month for an entire year. Here's the details you need to make...
Watching on demand. Good luck.
There's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including more on Labour's devastating winter fuel cuts.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
An army veteran has become the world's most tattooed woman after a 10-year journey to ink 99.98% of her body. I mean, that's really nearly everywhere. But I wonder, I mean, yes, she is unusual, and you'd know her if you met her, frankly, wouldn't you? But are tattoos acceptable they're becoming more and more acceptable just amongst all of us, aren't they? But what about in the workplace?
99.98% of her body tattooed. Do you think this would affect the way that she is received at work?
I do affect it would how she is seen at work, just purely because tattoos are still so stigmatised in the workplace. In today's rapidly evolving society, the traditional standards of what is socially acceptable are being redefined. Facial tattoos, full body tattoos, once stigmatised, are increasingly seen as a form of personal expression, and there shouldn't be a barrier to one's professional or social life.
If you are going for a job, for instance, we make up 90% of our minds about somebody within the first 3 seconds. And I have written a book on body language, and the face is just so important. You need to have the smile, you need to be able to read the facial expression, even when we're speaking. Now, if the face is really heavily tattooed, you can't do that.
Jade said that there is still this stigma, particularly to facial tattoos. We do judge people with tattoos, don't we?
We do. Unfortunately, we do, because it's not the norm. And as a human being, we tend to judge what is not the norm. And as Jade says, we are getting much more used to it. It is much more socially acceptable. But a lot of firms will say, if you've got a tattoo, you cover it. We don't want tattoos in the workplace.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 3:26. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, this week marks a Remember a Charity Week, and charities across the UK have been celebrating an increase in donations through people leaving a gift in their will, something that has become known as willanthropy. I like it. And with the cost of living rising, more people than ever have become reliant on charity donations. And joining us now to discuss this is the TV personality and the Strictly star and the all-round legend, Debbie McGee. Debbie, an absolute delight to have you on the show. Always a total pleasure. So you're joining us on this historic day as the first spacewalk by on non-professional astronauts is imminent. So we may have to cut away from you, but tell us about this magnificent act of willanthropy.
That's fine for that. I'll be watching avidly.
Tell us about where involved in willanthropy.
Well, it's willanthropy is leaving a legacy in your will to a charity. It is a new word. I think it's a great title, isn't it? And so I've got involved with Remember a Charity Week, which I thought was a great idea anyway, for us all to remember a charity, and then found out about willanthropy on the back of that, really, and thought, actually, I hadn't thought about it. And I work with lots of. I help a lot of charities, so I thought, yeah, I want them to keep going. Yeah, I want to, just keep myself. I want to keep the charities going. So, what a good idea! And so that's how I'm sort of here talking today, is that if anyone hadn't ever thought about it before, have a look on the Remember a Charity website, which is rememberacharity.org.uk. And, you know, it's quite easy to do, to change your will or make your will. And it might be you're not giving any money while you're alive because you might need it, and most people do these days, but you might leave a little something or a big something, and it'll be a legacy after you've gone. And especially if you've gone through things like you know, I've gone through, and most of us have, something where a charity has helped or the research has helped. It's so important to, you know, make sure they're still going long after we've gone. So that was the whole reason, really.
It's a superb initiative, and well done. And lots of people, of course, leave their money to like Battersea cats and dogs. I might give them a few quid myself because I got a lovely cat from them. Great. Now, can we talk about Strictly? Because, of course, Strictly starts tomorrow. There's been a bit of controversy around this year's show. What are your thoughts on that? You've been defending Giovanni. What's your thoughts on all of this year's show and the build-up to it?
Oh, I think it will be as wonderful as it's always been. You know, it's an uplifting show, isn't it? It's got the glamour, everything. There's nothing to make you sad in it. And, you know, I had the most amazing time. And Giovanni was my partner. And it's still, you know, a life-changing experience. And at that time in my life as well, it was a year after Paul, my late husband, had died. You know, it was a tough, tough time. And it just totally brought me out of all my grief. And everyone on the programme is just so lovely. It's like a big family. And my experience of Giovanni, I know other people have said they've had a different experience, but mine was he really looked after me in my grief. And we had a great time. Yeah, there he is. So great memories.
I remember, Debbie, at the time you spoke so movingly about how dance was like therapy for you. It helped to bring your Shazam back. It got you back on track. But I got to ask you at all about the investigation that's being carried out in Giovanni. Do you think that can be properly conducted? And have you been approached to give any evidence in that?
I think it will. I'm sure that, you know, they will do it very thoroughly, and the fact that it's taking quite a long time, you know, is that they're really going into it to make sure they make the right decision at the end of it. And I think lots of people will be invited to give their experience of Strictly. So I just hope at the end of the day, you know, I don't want anyone to be bullied. You know, I'm really against all of that. But we're all different. So people can react differently to different circumstances, or you just don't have a chemistry with somebody that somebody else might have a chemistry. So, you know, I don't know what went on, but I'm sure that they will go into it, and they are, in a lot of depth before making any decisions.
And you spoke very warmly there of Giovanni as your partner. But can I just ask you again, have you been approached to give any evidence in this investigation?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say or not, but yes, I have. So you know, it's all very secret. And I'm sure everybody else who's ever danced with him and people that have worked alongside him will have been asked to give evidence too. So, you know, I just hope it all turns out well for all parties.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you so much for that wonderful initiative of Willanthropy. We learned a new lovely word today. Debbie McGee, absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. There's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including more on Labour's plans to bring in new rent reforms. Could they actually push up the costs of rent by as much as 10%? But first, here's your headlines, and it's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon to you. It's just after 3:30. The top stories from the newsroom this afternoon. Sir Keir Starmer says the NHS is broken but not beaten, delivering a stark message after a damning report into the health service. Lord Darcy's rapid review highlighted rising demand, low productivity and poor morale, just some of the major challenges facing the NHS. It's after figures came out this morning showing ballooning waiting times and delays in A&E and in cancer care. Speaking earlier, the Prime Minister warned there'll be no more money without reform and said that big shifts are needed to secure the health service's future.
Only fundamental reform and a plan for the long term can turn around the NHS and build a healthy society. Now, it won't be easy, it won't be quick, it will take a 10-year plan, not just the work of one Parliament, but I know we can do it.
The UK's police and crime ministers had her belongings stolen from a hotel where she was giving a speech to members of the Police Superintendents Association. In that conference speech, Dame Deanna Johnson said the Labour government had inherited an epidemic of antisocial behaviour, of theft and shoplifting from the Conservative government. Warwickshire Police are now investigating the theft, and the Home Office have confirmed that no security risks were identified. A 17-year-old boy has been arrested as part of an investigation into a cyber attack on Transport for London. The National Crime Agency says the teenager was detained on suspicion of offences under the Computer Misuse Act. It comes as TfL said some customer names and contact details had been compromised in that breach, which started on the 1st of September. Some Oyster card data may also have been accessed, which could include bank account details. The National Crime Agency has also seized hundreds of dangerous life jackets destined for criminal gangs smuggling migrants across the Channel. The NCA says the jackets, which wouldn't have worked in deep water, were intended for small boat crossings and included children's sizes. A 23-year-old lorry driver has been arrested as investigations continue. The wife of disgraced paedophile TV star Rolf Harris has died at the age of 93, a year after her husband's death. Alwyn Hughes, who had been suffering from Alzheimer's, stood by Rolf Harris throughout his jail term for child sex offences. The couple were married for 65 years, and despite her husband's scandal, she attended every day of his trial in 2014. And billionaire Jared Isaacman and his crewmate Sarah Gillis have completed the first ever commercial spacewalk today. The pair floated out from their SpaceX Dragon capsule 400 miles above the Earth. Using experimental spacesuits, the privately funded missions made them the first to take a cosmic stroll without being professional astronauts. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you for one more update in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And let's take a quick look at the markets as they stand this hour. The pound will buy you $1.3065 and €1.1838. The price of gold, £1,947.96 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,235 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Top man Sam. Now, if you want to get in touch with me here at GB News, you know what to do. Go to gbnews.com/your say. And I'll read out the best few messages a little later in the show. Coming up, the winter fuel allowance map of shame. The MPs most at risk of losing their seats in a pensioner backlash. Don't miss it. I'm Alton Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Another pretty chilly feeling day after the cold night last night. It's actually going to be a colder night in the coming night, and there will still be a few showers around. But I think a generally drier day, particularly across western areas. We've got high pressure building in for Friday, but before then, still a cold Arctic northerly wind pushing into parts of Scotland and northern England, northeastern England in particular through today. So here it will still feel particularly cold in the wind, but further south and west, a little bit more shelter here, so it will feel slightly warmer today compared to yesterday. Again, showers will develop into the afternoon quite widely across the UK, heaviest though across coastal areas, and temperatures in the low teens for many of us. Now into this evening, we'll continue to see those showers at first, particularly across northeastern coasts of Scotland. But as the winds shift to more of a northeasterly, it will become drier across more western areas. So a dry evening to come for western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland. You couldn't rule out the odd shower, but I think there will be some clear skies before the sun sets. Into parts of Wales as well. Inland areas, though, of central England, southeast of England in particular, will probably see the potentially most heaviest showers into this evening. But showers will tend tend to fade away as that high pressure builds in overnight tonight. So a widely clear night away from the far southeast coast. We'll continue to see a risk of showers overnight. And that does mean that temperatures will fall away quite quickly this evening. So a colder night to come compared to last night. Just about anywhere rurally could catch a ground or air frost overnight tonight. And temperatures in towns and cities, though, just above zero. So a cold but sunny start to the day to come on Friday. I think the sunshine will be much longer lived through Friday as we do have that high pressure building in. Cloud will tend to thicken, though, across northwestern areas ahead of the next band of rain, but with more in the way of sunshine and lighter winds, it will feel warmer, with temperatures reaching the high teens for some of us.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Southbound A1M at the Boburn turnoff, junction 61. The emergency bridge repairs continue. It's looking slow going on that stretch with a lane closure in place. Warwickshire, the northbound M40 still closed, junction 12 up to 14. Buscadian up to Leamington Spa. Investigation work continues from a previous collision. That closure is causing queues on the approach. Issues north of Bristol, westbound M4 near the M32 turnoff, junction 19. The inside lane is coned off there. Still looking slow at the scene of a collision. There's one as well affecting the clockwise M25. Again, the inside lane's combed off. It's on the stretch between Potters Bar 24 and Enfield 25. That's queuing. And passengers are waiting for up to an hour at the Eurotunnel service at Folkestone at the moment too. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 3:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, 53 Labour MPs have recently abstained in the recent Commons vote, with the party winning the vote to cut winter fuel allowance for pensioners. Now, huge numbers of pensioners will be impacted in Labour constituencies. And joining me now to discuss this is Lee Evans, the chairman of Facts for EU. Lee, welcome to the show. So we carried the vote live on this show a couple of days ago. 348 votes to kill the winter fuel allowance. All of them were from the Labour Party. I got in touch with you because we decided to try and make a map of this, and that's what we can show our viewers today. Talk us through it, please. It's a superb piece of work. Lee Evans.
Yeah, we were all a little bit taken aback, just as you were, by this dramatic decision which affects some 10 million odd pensioners around our country. And like you, we look at the entire country. And so we thought, what better way of doing this in discussion with you than a GB News map, which we're working with you to develop. So if you want to put that up, we'll show you how the country's MPs voted. And that's the key thing, because if there's going to be a pushback on this from pensioners, then there are a lot of MPs that are going to be seriously worried. So what you can see there is a map showing in red what we're calling the kill sector, which is those MPs that voted to kill the winter fuel allowance, and in green those that voted to keep it. So you can see how that works across the country. But what's interesting, Martin, if I may, is like GB News, we like to look at the entire country. We're not London-centric. So I'm going to start, if I may, with just a little tour taking you from top of the country to the bottom, with some pretty stark figures that should be worrying for the Labour Party if pensioners decide that they're going to place their votes elsewhere next time on such a key issue. And what I'd like to do, if I may, is start up in Scotland.
Yep.
There's a new MP up there called Chris Kane that most people won't have heard of, but he's MP for Stirling and Strathallan, and he's got a majority of less than 1,400 votes. He ousted one of the SNP's MPs, and it was, of course, an SNP stronghold. Now, you'll probably be aware Stirling isn't actually that warm during the autumn and winter, and I can tell you that snow, from one of our readers, that snow has already fallen up there. Now, Chris Kane is quite a big gentleman. He's not quite the Eric Pickles, but he's getting there. So he's got lots of insulation. So no doubt he'll ride it out. We're not so sure about what his constituents may think about losing their winter fuel allowance. Okay. So that takes us from Scotland. Do you want me to go down to the bottom of the country, Martin?
Yeah, what I'm specifically interested in, Lee, is looking at, I know we've done some work in some of the smallest majorities in the country. Indeed. So some of the smallest majorities. We've got our next picture now. Let's look at Ashfield. Of course, we had Lee Anderson in just a moment ago. And you can see there, Lee, that Lee Anderson there was the only person in Nottinghamshire, with the exception of Robert Jenrick to the right, the long constituency there, that's Newark. That's a sea of Labour MPs who voted to kill the bill. But some of the stuff that's more interesting, Lee, is looking at some of the tiniest majorities across the UK. Can we talk about, for example, the smallest majority of all of the constituencies that voted to kill this bill is Hendon. Hendon has a mere majority of 15 votes, I understand, versus almost 12,000 constituents who lost their winter fuel allowance. An astonishing disparity.
Indeed, and Mr. David Hintu-Dushinsk, I hope I pronounced that correctly, is the new MP there. But as you say, with just a handful of votes, and it's only going to take a handful of very disgruntled pensioners, isn't it, to overturn that at the next election, regardless of any other factors that may be in play then. So, you know, politics is about many different subjects, as we all know, and people make their decisions on different topics. But there's an awful lot of pensioners out there, as you pointed out, Martin. It's only going to take a very few in the constituency of Hendon in North London to see David Pinto-Dushinks, him falling from power to the point where I don't have to learn how to pronounce his name anymore.
Yeah, and let's just go through the top five. So the 15 votes in Hendon is the majority versus 11,711 pensioners who lost their winter fuel allowance. In second place is Poole. 18 votes is the majority. Almost 19,000 voters there, Lee Evans, lost their winter fuel allowance. North West Cambridgeshire, 39 majority. Almost 17,000 voters lost their majority. Peterborough, 118, 14,372 people lost their winter fuel allowance. Chelsea and Fulham, votes majority, 152, 10,200 people lost their majority. So what we're looking at there, Lee Evans, are an awful lot of Labour seats who voted as a body. They followed the party whip, but their majorities are very, very slim. And so, Lee Evans, what you're saying is, if there was an organised, for example, OAP, old age protest vote in these constituencies, it would be certainly enough to tip the balance of power.
It's impossible to read it any other way. And it's interesting, Martin, that when you look through the majorities that Labour secured, a lot of seats are very, very tight indeed. And it's almost as if they fell for the media hype that they'd won a landslide, akin to Tony Blair's landslide some time ago. No, they didn't at all. In fact, they got less votes than did Jeremy Corbyn when he lost in the last election. And actually, when you look at some of these people, there are some big names in there. People like Wes Streeting. We've got 3 cabinet ministers who are on majorities of under 2,000. And what that means for the people out there is it only takes about 1,000 people or less to decide to switch their vote to another party. And instantly you've lost 3 cabinet ministers, and those are Wes Streeting, Jess Phillips and Naz Shah. And of course, Wes Streeting being the health minister, which would have an irony all of its own, wouldn't it?
Lee Evans, we have to leave it there. Fascinating data, and we're going to be covering this story throughout the rest of the show as well. Always a pleasure. Thank you. I know you've worked really, really hard on getting that together for me today. Lee Evans, the chair there of Facts for EU. Now, coming up, we'll be hearing about Navy bosses' plans to rename war training exercises for Royal Marines, as the old ones were too sexual and aggressive. You couldn't make it up. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Business News Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Luis Elizondo says that he worked at the Pentagon and that he knows that they have recovered material that is not from this Earth. He resigned after believing his government wasn't taking the threat of UFOs seriously. So have they been covering up alien material from us?
I don't think the claims that are being made in Luis Elizondo's book, Imminent, are new, but I think what we have to pay attention to is the seniority of, one, Luis Elizondo, and two, the people who recruited him, and indeed the people he worked for, which was the Department of Defence and the Pentagon.
You think that he was in a position to know about this?
Yeah, he would have been. He would have been speaking to the individuals who were taking part in these investigations. You're showing some of those clips just now that potential incursions by objects controlled by a non-human intelligence, potentially. We're not saying alien necessarily, but something non-human.
Seems a bit far-fetched to me, Andrew. I'm a sceptic.
When people say sceptical, I think as a species, we're relatively new in terms of what we do in space. But right now, we've got a robot on Mars that drives about and has a little helicopter drone that every so often comes up, flies about away 10 feet from it to collect samples and comes back. Now, a species a couple of hundred years down the line from us would have far better technology than that. So who's to say what we're encountering aren't just really advanced probes from something else that's just slightly ahead of us in the technological scale? I don't think that's too far stretch of the imagination.
When you do see things like what we just saw there, which was made public, the New York Times did a big expose on all of this, and actually, you know, the world didn't end. We weren't all outside fighting each other for scraps of food and burning down the nearest Lidl, were we? We just thought, oh, that's quite cool.
I think now we have to look at it and maybe take a step back, look at the people coming out now, talking about UFOs and thinking, is there something to this that we've maybe been overlooking?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 4. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, I've got some breaking news to bring you in the last couple of minutes. And Harvey Weinstein has been charged with some additional crimes. Harvey Weinstein has been charged with some additional crimes. I'll have more on those details as it emerges soon. Now, moving on, Navy bosses have renamed war training exercises for Royal Marines as the old ones were too sexual and aggressive. Has Britain's Royal Navy gone absolutely woke? Well, joining me now to discuss this is Major General Chip Chapman. Always an absolute pleasure, Chip, to have you on the show. Seriously, Chip, have we not got bigger fish to fry than worrying about the names of some of these exercises? Can you tell us, please, what some of the names were, what they're being changed to, and why this nonsense is occurring?
Well, two in particular were Final Thrust and Violent Entry, which do sound like bad 1970s porn film titles. And I think that really is the context behind some of this, because at least two of the reports that are out there in the last 5 years, the Wigston and Atherton report, are all about the fact that we keep abusing women in the army and the armed forces generally, with sexual harassment a constant feature of the continuous attitude surveys. So the real question is, you know, this is trivia in one sense, changing the names. I would be more triggered if the standards to make a commando had been changed, i.e. has the output changed? And secondly, what is the loss of capability in training? So the person who's really been triggered by this is the ex-Royal Marine instructor who seemed to go to the sun with what is essentially a non-issue. And if you want to be an inclusive force, then things which can look like sexual innuendo should probably be changed.
So you agree then that things like Violent Entry, which have been changed, as you said, to Green Salamander, which still actually sounds a little bit frisky, Green Salamander, if you have a certain carry-on mindset, and Final Thrust, I totally agree, sounds like it might be a terrible rock band from the 80s, been changed to Commando Forge. But really, does it matter what things are called? I mean, surely the whole point is that it's producing top quality candidates, top quality members of the armed force. And it's an ultra tough course that's very, very hard to get through. Who cares what it's called?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you focus on the output, not on anything else. Unfortunately, there are still Neanderthal throwbacks in the army and the commandos who want to turn both into organisations which are just full of testosterone-filled males and whites only. We saw this last month when the army had to apologise for racist and sexist abuse to Corporal Kerry-Ann Knight. And the real thing about all this is that we're paying out too much money for people who take us to employment tribunals when these sorts of cases occur. You know, we want to be an inclusive organisation with high values and standards when we don't have to shell out money which can go on bombs, bullets and beans rather than employment tribunal cases. That's the real harm that it does to the armed forces.
Okay, Chip Chapman, thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Have a very good one. Cheers. Now's a new way for you to get in touch with me. Send your views and post your comments by going to gbnews.com/your say. Plenty more to come, including that astonishing report we just put out, the map of shame for the winter fuel allowance. We've just revealed in this last hour that it contains 3 Labour cabinet ministers at risk of losing their seats if an organised pensioner vote backlash over the winter fuel allowance takes them on. Could axing the winter fuel allowance come back to haunt the Labour Party? We'll also discuss more on the shocking reports by former Labour Health Minister Lord Darzi, in which he describes the state of the NHS as dire and critical in its condition. Coming up, we'll be having a debate with a pro and an anti. Is it time to privatise the NHS? That's next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, but now it's time for your weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Still a cold feel for the next day or so, but it will turn warmer into the weekend. And it will also become much drier across western areas as high pressure is building in for the end of the week from the west. We've still got this northerly wind, though, bringing in Arctic air for many areas through this evening, as well as a few showers. Inland at first, but overnight they will become more and more restricted to just the east coast, as well as just the far north coast of parts of Wales too. Some of these showers across the east could still be heavy into this evening and bring a risk of hail, but for many of us, it is going to be a clear, dry and cold night tonight. Rurally, we could be down as low as -1 or 2 quite widely. And where we have seen some snow across the high ground in Scotland, we could be down lower than that first thing. But there will be plenty of sunshine in the morning. So despite the chilly start, the sunshine should still warm things up quite quickly. And the winds will be much lighter through tomorrow morning, so quite a pleasant start to the day. Across the northwest, though, parts of western Scotland, Northern Ireland, we will start to see some cloud bubbling up through the morning and a risk of a few showers. That is ahead of a weather front that is going to be spreading in from the northwest through Friday afternoon. You can see it here. So rain approaching parts of Northern Ireland later on in the day, and the sunshine will turn much hazier across parts of Scotland. Elsewhere, though, plenty of long-lived sunshine, and with lighter winds, it will feel much warmer tomorrow compared to today. Temperatures will still be a little below average in the mid-teens for most areas, highs of 17 degrees at a max in the far southeast, but it's certainly warmer than it has been lately. Now, the rain across the northwest continues its journey into parts of Scotland through Friday evening. That'll become a bigger feature as we head into Saturday, so rainfall totals could start to build up across far northwestern areas, whereas dry weather will hold on across the south. And as we look ahead to the start of next week, further wet weather in the north, but more dry and warm weather in the south.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Dumfries and Galloway firstly. The A75 is struggling. It's closed both ways between East Riggs and Gretna. A 2-lorry collision causing queues either side. Congestion north of Bristol for the westbound M4 near to the turn off the M32 at junction 19. A collision blocking lane 1 in the process of being recovered, still causing queues. Northbound M40 still shut between Gaydon at 12 up to Leamington Spa 14 in queuing. Investigation Construction work there is underway. And issues either side of the M25 this afternoon. Firstly, anti-clock before the M40 turn-off at 16. The inside lanes combed off, very slow at the scene of a collision. The earlier clockwise queue is still there, but the collision's gone away from Potter's Bar at junction 24. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Demand. Good luck.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, after a damning report into the NHS, today Sir Keir Starmer claimed the NHS must reform or die. So the big topic of our debate right soon after this is it time to do the unthinkable and privatise the NHS? We'll speak to health practitioners on both sides of that debate. And next up, Prince Harry is set to head off on a holiday with his closest mates to celebrate his 40th birthday, where Meghan stays at home, it's understood. Wonder how that went down with the missus. And today, a GB News exclusive report has identified a map of shame of how MPs who voted to kill the winter fuel allowance could be at risk of losing their seats. And that includes 3 Labour cabinet ministers. We'll have exclusive details coming up soon. We've got a superb hour ahead. That astonishing report from GB News shows precisely there are a raft of Labour Party MPs at peril of losing their seats if there is an old age protest and OAP around the winter fuel allowance. Some constituencies across the UK have majorities as small as 15 votes. 15 votes at the last general election, but with almost 12,000 people in those same constituencies losing their winter fuel allowance, could this be the basis of a grey dawn, a fight back to try and reclaim those seats in the name of fairness? That's all coming up in your next hour, including we've got Charlie Peters, our national reporter, who's just been in Rotherham at a grooming gang hearing. The only reporter there. He has some astonishing testimonies to tell us soon. Very, very moving. Can't wait for that. Now, it's your headlines, though, and it's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much, and good evening, good afternoon, in fact, to you. It's 2 minutes past 4. The top story this hour. Sir Keir Starmer says the NHS is broken, but not beaten, delivering a stark message after a damning report into the health service. Lord Darcy's rapid review highlighted rising demand, low productivity and poor morale, just some of the major challenges facing the NHS. It's after figures out earlier this morning showed ballooning waiting times and delays in A&E and cancer care. Speaking earlier, the Prime Minister warned there will be no more money without reform and said big shifts are needed to secure the NHS's future.
Only fundamental reform and a plan for the long term can turn around the NHS and build a healthy society. Now, it won't be easy, it won't be quick, it will take a 10-year plan, not just the work of one Parliament, but I know we can do it.
However, the Conservatives say it's time for the Labour Party to turn rhetoric into action, and earlier Shadow Health Secretary Victoria Adkins told us she's concerned by the government's first slow steps tackling the healthcare crisis.
I'm concerned because the first action of this government was to allow a budget-busting pay rise for junior doctors with no productivity forms attached. And they are also, I hear, going to cancel the productivity plan that I was bringing forward for technology. And if that is what they're doing, then that is of concern, because I fear we're in for an even rougher ride.
And next, just a breaking line from New York this afternoon. We're hearing that Harvey Weinstein has been hit with new criminal charges. That's as the disgraced movie producer gears up for a possible retrial. His 2020 rape conviction was overturned in April after a judge allowed testimony from accusers not formally involved in the case. Prosecutors in Manhattan are now investigating new sexual assault claims as more women continue to come forward, though the specifics have not been disclosed in court. It comes as the former Hollywood mogul's currently in intensive care in hospital, recovering from emergency heart surgery. He does continue to deny all allegations. Back here at home, the UK's Police and Crime Minister has had her belongings stolen from hotels where she was giving a speech to members of the Police Superintendents Association. In that conference speech, Dame Deanna Johnson said the Labour government had inherited an epidemic of antisocial behaviour, of theft and shoplifting from the Conservative government. Warwickshire Police are now investigating the incident, and the Home Office have confirmed no security risks were identified. A 17-year-old boy has been arrested as part of an investigation into a cyber attack on Transport for London. The National Crime Agency says the teenager was detained on suspicion of offences under the Computer Misuse Act. It comes as TfL said some customer names and contact details had been compromised in that breach, which started on the 1st of September. Some Oyster card data may also have been accessed, which could include bank account details. 6 aid workers with the United Nations Refugee Agency have been killed in 2 airstrikes on a school in Gaza, marking the highest death toll among UN staff in a single incident. One of those killed was a manager of a UN shelter that housed around 12,000 displaced people, most of them women and children. The school has now been hit 5 times since the war began. And staying with that story, we're just hearing that Sir Keir Starmer, Prime Minister, and the Foreign Secretary David Lammy are now on their way to Washington, D.C. to hold talks with President Biden. Understood that they will be discussing both that conflict in Gaza and also the Ukraine-Russia conflict. We'll bring you any more details on that as we get that throughout the rest of this afternoon. Meanwhile, Martin's Law, named after 29-year-old Martin Hett, who was one of 22 people killed in the Manchester bombing, has been introduced to Parliament today. The new legislation aims to strengthen public protection against terrorism. And under that law, venues could face fines of up to £18 million if they fail to adopt actions like training staff or improving security protocols. It fulfills the Prime Minister's promise to Martin's mother, Figan Murray, to bring in the new law after her tireless campaigning. The National Crime Agency has seized hundreds of dangerous life jackets destined for criminal gangs smuggling migrants across the Channel. The NCA, working with Dutch and Italian authorities, intercepted those faulty jackets in the Netherlands. The jackets, which wouldn't have worked in deep water, were intended for small boat crossings and did include some children's sizes. A 23-year-old lorry driver has been arrested as those investigations continue. Data centres will be classified as critical national infrastructure to protect against cyber attacks or possible IT blackouts, the government's announced today. The facilities store vital data from NHS records to smartphone photos and financial information. Their new status now puts data centres on par with water, with energy and other emergency services, ensuring greater government support to fend off cyber security threats. The move also coincides with proposed multi-billion-pound investment in Hertfordshire to build Europe's largest data centre. And finally, taking space exploration to new heights, 2 civilians have completed the first ever commercial spacewalk. Billionaire Jared Isaacman and his crewmate Sarah Gillis floated out from their SpaceX Dragon capsule 400 miles above Earth using experimental spacesuits. Without the usual safety of an airlock, the daring duo tested life support systems in the vacuum of space. And the privately funded missions made them the first to take a cosmic stroll without being professional astronauts. Now, though, and thankfully, the hatch is closed and the pair are safely back inside. Those are the latest headlines for now. Lewis Mackenzie will have your next update here at 4:30.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. Now, the Prime Minister today has said that the NHS must reform or die. A shocking report by former Labour Health Minister Lord Darzi has described the state of the NHS as dire and in critical condition. And the report finds that failings in care have led to the deaths of thousands of patients every year.
Big picture finding is the NHS is in a serious, critical condition. But the vital signs are normal, which will suggest that we can do something about this. To do it well, we need to engage the whole staff, patients, the public, the political leadership, all aligned to make that change happen as quickly as we can, because we can't wait.
Well, Keir Starmer made a speech early today on the biggest reimagining of the NHS today, where he said that funding will be moved away from unproductive hospitals. Well, GB News' political correspondent Olivia Utley joins us now. Olivia, Sir Keir Starmer very clear, saying the NHS may be broken, but it's not beaten. He's saying we cannot simply keep putting more money into the system. We have to fix the plumbing before we turn on the taps. No more money without reform. It's got to be said, he sounds every inch like Nigel Farage or a Conservative Prime Minister, actually grasping the nettle, taking the bull by the horns and saying the NHS needs to be fixed. Tell us more.
Well, exactly. Very bullish rhetoric from Keir Starmer on what the NHS needs. And the diagnosis is widely accepted to be correct from pretty much all parties. The NHS has been a black hole for funding for a long time now. And Lord Darzi is not the first person to suggest that very soon we will be an NHS with a country attached to it. That's how much of British taxpayer money is going into the NHS. And the problem is, of course, that that money isn't translating into more appointments, a better service for patients. Keir Starmer said that that is going to be addressed under this new Labour government. He talks about a 10-year plan. He talks about making the difficult decisions. He talks about productivity reform. Now, I'm sure this will be music to the ears of lots of our viewers and listeners, but I think he's going to come up against some problems, not least of which is the unions. Reforming productivity means reforming personnel, and that is probably necessary. Between 2012 and 2019, there was a 17% increase in the number of people working in the NHS. But that increase, as anyone who's tried to get a GP appointment or attended A&E will know, did not translate into a better service for patients. But if Keir Starmer starts trying to perhaps take jobs away from bloated NHS management or reform the structure of the NHS, then he will run into difficulty with the unions. Is he prepared for that? Well, I asked him a little earlier today.
Professor John Bell said this morning that doctors in the BMA have been a major drag on reforming healthcare. Do you predict that the BMA will now embrace productivity reform with open arms?
Well, look, I've said we'll do this with the staff, and we will. But I know from my old job running the Crown Prosecution Service that whenever you try to reform anything, there will be some people, I'm afraid, who will say, oh, don't do that, it's better as it is, I wouldn't do that, keep things as they are. We have to take that attitude on, in my view. It's an inhibitor of change. So whilst we say we will do it with people, and we will, do it together, and we will, I know in my heart of hearts we will meet pockets of people who will say, don't do it, slow down, go over there, not over there, leave things as they are. We have to take that on, and we will take that on. That's part and parcel of the change that we need to bring about. Thank you.
So Keir Starmer saying there that he is prepared to take on the attitude of BMA workers, BMA doctors, who are potentially a drag on NHS reform. Well, he says that now. What will happen when he actually gets into conversation with the unions, and will it ever get that far? Because the other issue which Keir Starmer is facing is that he talks about a 10-year plan, about long-term solutions. He talks about major surgery rather than sticking plaster solutions, and that all sounds very sensible. Again, I'm sure music to the ears of many of our viewers and listeners. But when we get into a winter crisis, as we almost certainly will, there is a winter crisis in the NHS almost every year, there will be calls from across the political spectrum for short-term, urgent solutions. And how will Keir Starmer face those?
OK, Olivia Utley, superb reporting as ever. Thank you very much. And fair play to Keir Starmer and West Street. And they're finally stopping treating the NHS as sacrosanct, and they're getting to grips with the topic. Thank you very much, Olivia Utley. Now, the big question is it time to think about the unthinkable? Is it time to contemplate privatising the NHS? And joining me now to discuss this is the political commentator Jess Gill. Jess, welcome to the show. The figures are startling. 180 billion quid last year. The thick end of that was the NHS budget. 17% increase on staff, and yet record waiting lists, terrible outcomes, and now we've got the Prime Minister saying reform or die. But what might that reform look like? People like Nigel Farage would like it at least to be partially privatised, to take the burden away from those who can afford to pay and help the neediest who can't. Is it time for such a radical move in the UK, Jess?
Well, thanks for having me on, Martin. If the choice is between reform or die, honestly, I would just let the NHS die. I don't think Keir Starmer is radical enough, in all honesty. This is people's lives we're talking about here. So many people have suffered thanks to the NHS. And who is it protecting? Who is it saving at this point? I mean, patients are let down, the most vulnerable in society, when we talk about old people who are struggling to get an appointment, or the working class who have no other choice but to use this monopolised system. It doesn't do them any favours. Doctors and staff and nurses are underpaid. Who is it actually helping? And especially not the taxpayer, who has to foot the bill for the endless funding the NHS gets.
But, I mean, many people will say that it's part of our constitution almost. It's part of our national offering, the NHS, to be free at the point of care. That's a right of the British individual, and tampering with that would be the kind of thing going towards an American privatised system, the kind of thing that many, many people are warning is the route we should never go down. It will price out the poorest. It will mean terrible care for those at the bottom.
I mean, what's the point of it being free at the point of use when nobody can use it because of the ridiculously long waiting lines? The idea that it's a dichotomy between the US and the UK healthcare systems is a complete falsity. It's a complete myth. There are so many other healthcare systems. Look at Scandinavian models, look at Germany, look at Singapore. And also, may I add, the NHS, the US healthcare system isn't a privatised system. There's so much lobbying going involved, there's so much regulation that creates these monopolies. I don't think either of those models are preferable, and no advocate of NHS privatisation or even reform or abolition, like I would, is advocating for that.
And what about the Labour Party's move? Very strong words today about moving towards a preventative model. And we know what that looks like already, Jessica. It means not being able to have a fag outside a football ground. It means controls on being able to buy cigarettes. What next? Cigarettes and alcohol oasis. Again, it means cleaning children's teeth at school. It means potentially sugar taxes, fat taxes. Do you think we're going to see part of the modification of the NHS involves more control of our lives before we even get anywhere near a hospital?
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastically put. I think this is the product of having a socialised system. It's not just socialising our healthcare, it's socialising our bodies and lives, and the government thinks they're responsible of that. If somebody, quite frankly, wants to take the risk of cutting down their life years by having a cigarette, who am I to stop them? And I don't think that's anyone's responsibility or anyone's say to do so. And the fact that the government is getting in the way is a complete infringement on civil liberties, and I don't think it's their right to do so.
OK, superb stuff. Thank you very much for joining us. Jess Gill, political commentator. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you. Now, I've lots more on that story at 5 o'clock, and there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com, and you've helped to make it the fastest growing national news website in the country, so thank you very much. Now, brace yourselves. It's time now for the Great British Giveaway and the biggest cash prize that we've ever given away. That's right, £36,000 could be yours, and that's like having an extra £3,000 every month, tax-free, in your bank account for an entire year. And here's the details that you need to try and make that wedge yours.
On demand. Good luck.
Good luck indeed. Now, up next, we'll be discussing Prince Harry's royal return and much, much more. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Michael found the recipe for success without going to university. Instead, he went looking for answers inside of a kitchen. The 22-year-old has just finished a Level 2 course in professional cookery at UCB, a college in Birmingham.
When I started UCB, I was expecting to be so intense from day one, but it's not. It sort of builds up, so to the point where you get comfortable. And building that comfort is a huge part of becoming a chef, because you need to be comfortable being in your own skin.
This week, tens of thousands of students get their A-level results. The college wants them to remember university isn't the only option after school, and West Midlands Mayor Richard Parker agrees.
University is the right route for lots of our young people, but there are other pathways to getting access to qualifications that will give young people the skills they need to succeed in life.
Further education principal Rosa Wells says apprenticeships and technical courses are also great routes to a career.
Here at University College Birmingham, we offer vocational courses. These are hands-on technical courses that can give people a different opportunity, something different to school. So we've got brilliant facilities that really give students industry standard training.
A skills shortage across the UK means youngsters learning trades are desperately needed. 36% of job vacancies are due to shortages. The Labour government's new body, Skills England, has been created to bring training providers and businesses together with local and national authorities plus unions to target trade gaps and regional requirements. Michael's now finishing his qualification. Where he goes next is down to him.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 4:23. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, let's have a bit of fun now, because Prince Harry is set to head off on a holiday with his closest mates. Yes, a lads' tour to celebrate his 40th birthday, while the Mrs. Meghan stays at home minding the nippers. So far, so beautiful. Now, this comes as sources close to the Prince report he is feeling more and more isolated, living in California despite ruling out a return to the UK. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the royal broadcaster Helena Chard. Helena, absolute pleasure, as always, to have you on the show. Now, I refer back to 2012, when Prince Harry went to Las Vegas. He got his kit off, he jumped in the pool. He was never more popular. That's the Harry that we miss. That's the Harry we want back. This can only be a good thing. What goes on tour stays on tour.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. But we do hear
He is a different guy. Everybody wants to see him laughing. Everyone wants to see the cheeky, chappy Prince Harry. But we have been updated, I think, that he's very much into his mindfulness and yoga and his clean way of living. I know. He's got his birthday this Sunday on the 15th. He's going to have a private little gathering, obviously, with his wife and children at his Montecito mansion. But it's the getaway with his closest mates that we're quite interested in. I would love to think that this is really authentic and it is going to be a great time for him and his mates, and he's going to let his hair down, as you can imagine, and have a few drinks and have a good time. I don't know. A part of me just thinks it's so ideal, isn't it, from a PR point of view, again, that he is going away with his mates. We obviously, when he comes to the UK, Meghan's not with him, and everyone talks about how they're almost not together in that, stance. Meghan's not supporting him. She should be travelling with him to the UK. Now seeing him traveling, spending some time with mates, it sort of almost normalizes this situation where he goes away on his own. Who's going to be there? I don't know. I would like to think it's everybody he knows, but there's his aides, his old former friends that he's apparently in touch with. We've been updated that he's trying to get back into royal life. Sort of. I believe, actually, he's been obsessing about his public image and he wants to change that around. There's so much that's here that we could talk about. I just hope that he's going to have fun in the mountains.
The fact of the matter is, back in the good old days, when Harry was a bit more of a rapscallion, shall we say, a bit more of a rogue. This guy used to be in the army. He used to read Loaded magazine, and a magazine that I used to edit. We have photographs of Harry with his muscular torso reading Loaded magazine in the desert outside the army barracks, and then he came out of the army and he was famed for his service. He was loved by the nation. He went to Las Vegas being very, very ordinary, having a pool party, surrounded by hot chicks. The fellas wanted to be him. The women wanted to be with him. That's the Harry we miss. So I was quite depressed there when he said he's going to get into yoga and mindfulness when he goes on this trip. Why can't he just go and have let his hair down? He hasn't got much hair left. Let it down when he's still got it.
He's going to take a skinny dip, I'm sure, with all the guys, whoever's going to be there. Guy Pelly, maybe. I don't know. Maybe Nacho, I don't know, Figueres, although he's friends with him, I think, locally. But yeah, I mean, remembering his 21st birthday, where he actually said some wonderful things about his brother, his 30th birthday at Clarence House, where he had all his family around him. I mean, imagine, it was a really wonderful bash. Everyone was there loving him. It was a great situation. I mean, this is his 40th. This is a milestone birthday. I'm surely is going to be thinking about his family and thinking about what he's achieved. It really is a time for him to think about things. But obviously there's going to be no wolf at the door for him. He's getting his windfall of money from the late Queen Mother, despite being a multimillionaire. So, I mean, he's sort of made now for a little while, I guess. Let's see what happens. But I do feel that it's definitely about the PR. It's definitely about the PR. And obviously, as we know, there is an inadequacy that he feels that he wants to live up to Prince William. We know all about that. And I think he's trying to get himself back into the public's good books. Absolutely.
Now, Helena, let me interject. It's worth pointing out at this point that there has been a leak from a WhatsApp group, apparently, of Harry and his male friends, and one of them claimed that Harry is an angry boy now. Things haven't turned out quite how he anticipated. So there is this constant rumour that he's kind of wafting around the Hollywood mansion, bit of a henpecked house husband. Spare is the word that you would probably use, a spare what's it at a wedding. He seems like he hasn't really got much of a purpose. Could this be basically him trying to get back to basics, trying to be normal again? And more to the point, if he's always living under the shadow of Meghan, this is him trying trying to, like, cast that to one side and be himself. Maybe that's what we need. We need to see the real Harry, not the downtrodden, henpecked Harry.
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, obviously, we've got Spare, the paperback coming out as well in October. I mean, the public backlash he's getting here, which is quite understandable, is huge. I mean, his ratings used to be so high. I don't know what the percentage is at the moment, but it's not good at all. And that will be really eating away at Prince Harry, who has looked at every article that's been written about him since being young and obsesses about how people view him. This will be eating away. It's completely affected his reputation. And obviously the people that are going to be there in the Montecito, I don't know where it is, the lakes or the peaks, or where he's doing skinny dipping in the cold springs. He's going to want to try and, get some info. How can I change my public image around? Help me. Yeah. This is a cry for help, I see.
Certainly is. Helena Child, we have to leave it there. Always a pleasure to have you on the show. So there we go, skinny dipping in the Beverly Hills. That's what he used to do in Las Vegas. Now, moving on, there's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including 53 Labour MPs abstained on the winter fuel bill, 348 voted against it. That upset millions across the country. I'll be speaking to the founder of the Pensioner Vote next about an OAP, an old age protest vote that could come back to haunt Labour Party MPs, including cabinet ministers. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines. His debut, the superb Lewis Mackenzie.
What an introduction there. Thank you very much, Martin. Good afternoon. It's 4:30. I'm Lewis Mackenzie in the GB Newsroom. Sir Keir Starmer says the NHS has broken but not beaten, delivering a stark message after a demanding report into the health service. Lord Darcy's rapid review highlights rising demands, low productivity and poor morale, just some of the major challenges facing the NHS. It's after figures out this morning show ballooning waiting times, long delays in A&E and cancer care. Speaking earlier, the Prime Minister warned there will be no more money without reform and said big shifts are needed to secure the NHS's future.
Only fundamental reform and a plan for the long term can turn around the NHS and build a healthy society. Now, it won't be easy, it won't be quick, it will take a 10-year plan, not just the work of one Parliament, but I know we can do it.
The UK's Police and Crime Commissioner has had her belongings stolen from a hotel where she gave a speech to members of the Police Superintendents Association. In her conference speech, Dame Diana Johnson said the Labour government had inherited an epidemic of antisocial behaviour, theft and shoplifting from the Conservative government. Warwickshire Police are investigating the theft and the Home Office confirmed no security risks were identified. A 17-year-old boy has been arrested as a part of an investigation into a cyber attack on Transport for London. The National Crime Agency says the teenager was detained on suspicion of offences under the Computer Misuse Act. It comes as TfL said some customers' names and contact details had been compromised in the security breach, which started on the 1st of September. Some Oyster card data may also have been accessed, which could include bank details. Harvey Weinstein has been hit with new criminal charges as the disgraced movie producer gears up for a possible retrial. His 2020 rape conviction was overturned in April after a judge allowed testimony from accusers not formally involved in the case. Prosecutors in Manhattan are now investigating new sexual assault claims as more women come forward through the specifics have not been disclosed in court. He continues to deny all allegations. And billionaire Jared Isaacman and crewmate Sarah Gillis have completed their first ever commercial spacewalk. The pair floated out from their SpaceX Dragon capsule 400 miles above Earth. Using experimental spacesuits, the privately funded missions made them the first to take a cosmic stroll without being professional astronauts. Those are the latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3065 and 1.1838 euros. The price of gold is £1,947 and 96 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 8,235 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Lewis Mackenzie, a voice like treacle, and what a head of hair. Magnificent. Now, if you want to get in touch, simply go to gbnews.com/your say. And I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Still a cold feel for the next day or so, but it will turn warmer into the weekend. And it will also become much drier across western areas as high pressure is building in for the end of the week from the west. We've still got this northerly wind, though, bringing in Arctic air for many areas through this evening, as well as a few showers. Inland at first, but overnight they will become more and more restricted to just the east coast, as well as just the far north coast of parts of Wales too. Some of these showers across the east could still be heavy into this evening and bring a risk of hail, but for many of us, it is going to be a clear, dry and cold night tonight. Rurally, we could be down as low as -1 or 2 quite widely. And where we have seen some snow across the high ground in Scotland, we could be down lower than that first thing. But there will be plenty of sunshine in the morning. So despite the chilly start, the sunshine should still warm things up quite quickly. And the winds will be much lighter through tomorrow morning, so quite a pleasant start to the day. Across the northwest, though, parts of western Scotland, Northern Ireland, we will start to see some cloud bubbling up through the morning and a risk of a few showers. That is ahead of a weather front that is going to be spreading in from the northwest through Friday afternoon. You can see it here. So rain approaching parts of Northern Ireland later on in the day. And the sunshine will turn much hazier across parts of Scotland. Elsewhere, though, plenty of long-lived sunshine, and with lighter winds, it will feel much warmer tomorrow compared to today. Temperatures will still be a little below average in the mid-teens for most areas, highs of 17 degrees at a max in the far southeast, but it's certainly warmer than it has been lately. Now, the rain across the northwest continues its journey into parts of Scotland through Friday evening. That'll become a bigger feature as we head into Saturday, so rainfall totals could start to build up across far northwestern areas, whereas dry weather will hold on across the south. And as we look ahead to the start of next week, further wet weather in the north, but more dry and warm weather in the south.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon to you. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. The westbound M8 halfway between Edinburgh and Glasgow. The Heartlands Interchange Junction 4A still queuing following an earlier vehicle fire. All the lanes are back open now. And northbound M40 in Warwickshire, Junction 12 to 14 is still closed off. Cascading up to Leamington Spa. Investigation work continues from an earlier collision. It's still causing queues. Still struggling somewhat north of Bristol on the westbound M4 near to the turn off of the M32 at 19, though better news there, an earlier collision has cleared. Clockwise M25 St Albans Junction 22 to South Mims 23 and the roadwork still queuing, not helped there by an earlier broken down van. And if you're heading for passenger Eurotunnel services at Folkestone, currently waiting times of up to an hour. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 4:38. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, join me now to... I'm talking about the change in the voting map. This is the map of shame, as we called it. There was a vote this week, of course, to scrap the winter fuel allowance, and it was 438 Labour MPs voted to scrap that, 53 abstained. And a map that we produced shows that those seats are under grave peril, with some having very very thin margins of victory. Now, joining me now to discuss this is David Pinless, the founder of the Pensioner Vote. David, welcome to the show. Always an absolute pleasure. So we worked together on this along with Lee Evans at facts4eu.org. The chairman was on the show earlier on today, and all along we've been looking at this huge majority, this backlash voting down the winter fuel allowance, and upon further analysis, David, some rather choice pieces of information are leaping out at us. Please tell us more.
Well, good afternoon, Martin, and thank you very much for having me again on the show. We all know that Labour has a majority that's a mile wide and just an inch thick, and they've got themselves in a real mess. But instead of sorting it out, they've doubled down, even trebled down. I've got some interesting statistics here. There are around 50 Labour constituencies where their majority is under 2,000, and it would take a very small swing for them to lose their seat. So take an extreme example. We've got Hendon, where there's a Labour majority of just 15, but there are 12,000 people there, 12,000 pensioners, who are set to lose their winter fuel allowance. So it would just take 16 pensioners who voted Labour to change their vote, and Labour would be gone. So they are severely at risk. If we now look at the other extreme, if we look at Labour constituencies where they have a very large majority, they are often in areas of high social deprivation. Take an example, Sheffield Heeley, Labour has a massive majority of 15,000, and 13,000 pensioners are going to lose their winter fuel allowance. So obviously Labour is somewhat less at risk here, but the pensioners here are very much at risk because they are the ones experiencing pensioner poverty. Now, the interesting question for me as a pensioner is, what about those pensioners who did not vote but could have done so, and also those who might not have voted Labour had they known they would lose the winter fuel allowance? So this morning, I scanned through our database to see if I could add some interesting statistics to this map. And we've got just short of 10,000 members, all of whom have recently joined, and obviously all of whom have internet access and are tech savvy. Statistically, 10,000 is a significant sample. And I've rounded the numbers up to 10,000 to make the numbers easier to understand. So of the 10,000 members we have, rounded up, 1,400 of them are not registered to vote. 5,000 of them did not vote. 3,600 did vote. Of those 3,600, Labour 1,600, Conservative 900, Reform 820, Lib Dem 200, the others 80. So in other words, Labour got 16% of the pensioner vote as far as eyesight is concerned. Conservative 9%, Reform 8%. Conservative and Reform together above Labour.
Okay, so David, I just want to interject just to get back to our map. And this is fascinating stuff, but just let's get that map back on the screen again, the full map there of Scotland, England and Wales, and just talk through what that map is. Get it on the screen, please, in the gallery. So what you can see there, the red seats, those are the seats that voted to kill the winter fuel allowance, and all of them are Labour seats. The green colours, those are the MPs that voted to keep the winter fuel allowance, and the amber ones, they're the abstentions. They're almost entirely Labour Party, of course, with a few Sinn Féiners over there in Northern Ireland. And when you delve into some of these figures, there are some incredible majorities, very slim majorities there, David Pinless. As you said, Hendon, just 15 votes, yet almost 12,000 people in that seat lost their winter fuel allowance. In Poole, a majority of just 18, almost 19,000 people lost their winter fuel allowance. North West Cambridgeshire, 39 majority, almost 17,000 lost their winter fuel allowance. So, David Pinless, I put it to you at the Pensioner Vote that this could be a significant political uprising and gathering if the grey vote, to call it that crudely, were to circle around this issue and to form a political movement. This could be a severe headache for Labour Party MPs, including, as the data shows, including 3 cabinet ministers.
I think the take-home from all of this, Martin, is that there are 2 things. One is that Labour is severely at risk from a pensioner backlash. That's number one. And number 2 is that pensioners are not politically engaged. much rather like the rest of the population. And that's one of the reasons we have the pensioner vote, to try and get pensioners more politically engaged. Now, Martin, I look at where I live on that map. I'm in North Wales, a red area. I've got the central heating on today. I'm wearing a sweater. I've got the central heating. It's okay for me. I can afford it. A couple of years ago, I used to be a volunteer, and I delivered meals with other volunteers to people who were at risk. And I'd go into the homes of the elderly and the vulnerable. I noticed two things. And by the way, in those days, I didn't even know what winter fuel allowance was. I noticed two things. They were either sitting at home in the freezing cold wearing a coat, can you imagine? Or I went into other people's houses and they were so warm and stuffy, I just wanted to get out. And some elderly people obviously do need to live in a very warm home. And I just thought to myself then, how on earth do they afford their fuel bills? How on earth do they afford their fuel bills?
Okay. David, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. We've simply run out of time. But look, we're going to continue this conversation throughout the days and weeks. And I know there's yet more data that we're going to put onto this map, and we're going to get a target C list together to really get those pensioners motivated and together. David Pinless, founder of the Pensioner Vote, thanks for all the work you're doing. I'm happy to be of service here at GB News to get your membership going through the roof. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, 7 men are due to be sentenced tomorrow for a string of child sex offences dating back to the 2000s. Of course, this is the grooming gang scandal, and I'll be joined by a national reporter, Charlie Peters, who has all of the latest from Sheffield. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's News Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Fatima's UK campaign, Children and Young People Matter, because I actually run a campaign, and my ministry today is about looking after children in the care system and improving their life outcomes. For me, I had a difficult start to my childhood, and I will never forget it. I mean, I always say I may have left the care system, but the care system hasn't left me. And I instantly understand the importance of giving our young children and young people the opportunity to also, have good life outcomes. So Fatima's UK campaign is all about that. And it's a summit next year. Eamon, I hope you're going to come.
No, and we've talked about this before, and certainly, I mean, I believe in what you're doing. I think it's marvellous what you're doing, and that's why, when you think about children, and children are so close to you, and you look at that horror that happened in Southport yesterday, I mean, things like that
exactly.
will really hit home hard.
Well, children are the innocent ones, aren't they, Eamon? And this is what we look at when you think they're the future. We've got to start to put them back at the top. And it's a travesty when we see things like that, that happen. Children are the ones that are impacted. And, it's, for me, really important to be able to do the best we can and looking after their future. And so hopefully, I'm going to the Pyrenees in September, Eamon. That's my next challenge, the Bay of Biscay from France to Spain and back. And hopefully people can go online, fatimascampaign.com, and give generously to help make a difference to these young people's lives. Because, as I say, children are the future.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's News Channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:48. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, 7 men are due to be sentenced tomorrow for a string of child sex offences perpetrated in the 2000s. And this comes following a 5-year investigation by officers from the National Crime Agency into child sex abuse offences against teenage girls in Rotherham. And joining me now to discuss this is GB News' national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, welcome to the show. Charlie, you were in court today. You sent through to me some incredibly moving victim impact statements, Charlie. Harrowing stuff. Please talk us through it.
Good afternoon, Martin. It was an incredibly emotional scene inside the courtroom here at Sheffield Crown Court as 2 victim impact statements were read out as part of this 5-year-long NCA, National Crime Agency, investigation into a child sex abuse grooming gang in Rotherham, which was operating in the 2000s, just when that town in South Yorkshire was experiencing some of the most appalling child sex abuse scandal that this country, or indeed Europe, has ever seen. Now, 7 men are due to be sentenced tomorrow. They are Mohammed Amar, Yasser Ajaib, Mohammed Zamir Sadiq, Mohammed Siab, Abid Sadiq, Tahir Yassin and Ramin Bari. But as I said, Martin, the real delivery and the key emotional moment from this afternoon's proceedings were those victim impact statements. One survivor addressing the defendants directly in the courtroom, speaking to them as they looked down in the dock. They all arrived and addressed and greeted their families in the public gallery earlier this afternoon. One Urdu interpreter was required inside the dock. But then when that survivor spoke, she detailed how by the time she was 16, she had been abused by some 150 men. She said she was trafficked across England. She said that her phone was taken away. She was threatened with violence. She said that when she was 11 years old, the abuse started and she was forced to take a virginity test. She spoke directly to the man who was convicted of making her go through that horrific ordeal inside the courtroom here. She went on to say, "I am your karma." She said, "You stole my childhood. Now I'm taking your freedom. 22 years ago, you first started grooming me, and 10 years ago, I started my justice fight." Well, that survivor, with that sentencing tomorrow, will have that justice that she has waited for over 2 decades. We then had a second victim impact statement read out by a prosecuting barrister while that survivor was watching on via video link. And that statement said, "Your actions, which briefly satisfied your desires, have had a lifelong effect on me. I am a survivor and I am a fighter. I will continue to be strong and continue to seek justice. I am now in control of my life." She said, "You violated and humiliated me when I was a vulnerable child. Now it's your turn to feel as I did. The 3 of you being convicted has given me that control." That was the closing sentence from extensive remarks that were delivered by those 2 separate survivors today in the court, with one of them addressing them directly. Now, those 7 men convicted on a string of child sexual abuse offences, including indecent assault, trafficking and rape, will be sentenced tomorrow. It's part of an Operation Stovewood investigation. Stovewood is the National Crime Agency's investigation into historic non-familial child abuse in Rotherham. It was launched in 2014 after a report by Alexis J, a social worker, found that some 1,400 girls and boys in the town had been abused from 1997 to 2013. Now, the NCA, the National Crime Agency, Britain's FBI, they've identified some 1,150 victims. They've made over 250 arrests. These convictions, which came after a 9-week trial concluding in June, raised the number of convictions they've had to over 38. This is, by my count, one of the largest prosecutions that they've successfully had. Certainly the largest in recent years. In another case, there was a 13-strong set of convictions, but that was split over 2 separate trials. But 7 men tomorrow will be sentenced, and the judge here, His Honour Michael Slater, said that they will be facing long custodial sentences.
Charlie Peters, some of the testimony is almost too harrowing to read out. I knew it was wrong, but I wanted to belong somewhere. You monsters took advantage of my vulnerabilities. You started to pass me around as if I was a piece of meat, man to man, city to city. And tomorrow, those survivors will get justice, Charlie Peters. And thank you for being there today to pass that on to the nation, to make sure that their voices are heard. Thank you very, very much, Charlie Peters. Oh, what do you say to that? There's lots more coming up on that story in the next hour, as well as the shocking report into the NHS by the former Labour Health Minister, Lord Darcy, in which he describes the state of the NHS as dire and in critical condition. But is it too late to save it, or is it time to think about partially privatising it? I'll talk about that with Professor Carol Sikora next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now's your weather.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Still a cold feel for the next day or so, but it will turn warmer into the weekend. And it will also become much drier across western areas as high pressure is building in for the end of the week from the west. We've still got this northerly wind, though, bringing in Arctic air for many areas through this evening, as well as a few showers. Inland at first, but overnight they will become more and more restricted to just the east coast, as well as just the far north coast of parts of Wales too. Some of these showers across the east could still be heavy into this evening and bring a risk of hail, but for many of us, it is going to be a clear, dry and cold night tonight. Rurally, we could be down as low as -1 or 2 quite widely. And where we have seen some snow across the high ground in Scotland, we could be down lower than that first thing. But there will be plenty of sunshine in the morning. So despite the chilly start, the sunshine should still warm things up quite quickly. And the winds will be much lighter through tomorrow morning, so quite a pleasant start to the day. Across the northwest, though, parts of western Scotland, Northern Ireland, we will start to see some cloud bubbling up through the morning and a risk of a few showers. That is ahead of a weather front that is going to be spreading in from the northwest through Friday afternoon. You can see it here. So rain approaching parts of Northern Ireland later on in the day, and the sunshine will turn much hazier across parts of Scotland. Elsewhere, though, plenty of long-lived sunshine, and with lighter winds, it will feel much warmer tomorrow compared to today. Temperatures will still be a little below average in the mid-teens for most areas, highs of 17 degrees at a max in the far southeast, but it's certainly warmer than it has been lately. Now, the rain across the northwest continues its journey into parts of Scotland through Friday evening. That'll become a bigger feature as we head into Saturday, so rainfall totals could start to build up across far northwestern areas, whereas dry weather will hold on across the south. And as we look ahead to the start of next week, further wet weather in the north, but more dry and warm weather in the south.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Westbound M8, so halfway between Edinburgh towards Glasgow, still queuing around the Heartlands interchange. That's junction 4A, following an earlier vehicle fire. All the lanes are back open, though. Northbound M40 in Warwickshire still struggling. 2 lanes coned off Gaydon at 12 up towards Leamington Spa at 14. A collision earlier is still being recovered there. Cardiff, eastbound M4 toward Newport, junction 32 to Cardiff Gate at 30. All the traffic being held. There's an overturned car blocking all 3 lanes. It's queuing both ways. Eastbound queue the worst. Clockwise M25 St Albans to South Mims in the roadworks there. Junction 22 to 23 is still queuing following an earlier breakdown. And a collision clockwise on the M25 just after a junction 16 for the M40. Very slow going. The outside lane there is coned off.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good luck.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us! Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hey, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, after a damning report into the state of the NHS, today Sir Keir Starmer claimed the NHS must reform or die. So the big topic of our debate today is it time to do the unthinkable and privatise the NHS? And today, a GB News exclusive report has identified a map of shame of how MPs voted to kill the winter fuel allowance. If you add on top their thin margins, we can exclusively reveal today which Labour Party MPs are most at risk of losing their seats to an old age protest vote. And after the UK's Crime Minister had her purse stolen at a police conference this week, we'll discuss with the former Minister for Crime Prevention what this rather ironic theft says about a rising epidemic of crime across our country. And that's all coming up in your next hour. Once the show, always a delight to have your company. Also coming in this hour, Charlie Peters, our national reporter, just gave an astonishing testimony of evidence he heard today at Sheffield Court. There's a trial tomorrow, a sentencing of 7 men from the Rotherham grooming gang. Survivors will finally get justice today. 2 brave girls had their chance to read out impact statements to those monsters, and it was an astonishing testimony. We'll have full details on that, and you can hear that later on in the show. It's harrowing, but vitally important that we get these messages out. If you want to get in touch, you know what to do. Go to gbnews.com/your say. But now let's have your latest news headlines, and here's Lewis Mackenzie.
Good afternoon, it's 5 o'clock. I'm Lewis Mackenzie in the GB newsroom. Sir Keir Starmer says the NHS is broken but not beaten, delivering a stark message after a damning report into the health service. Lord Darcy's rapid review highlights rising demands, low productivity and poor morale, just some of the major challenges facing the NHS. It's after figures out this morning showed ballooning waiting times and delays in A&E and cancer care. Speaking earlier, the Prime Minister warned there will be no more money without reform and said big shifts are needed to secure the NHS's future.
Only fundamental reform and a plan for the long term can turn around the NHS and build a healthy society. Now, it won't be easy, it won't be quick, it will take a 10-year plan, not just the work of one Parliament, but I know we can do it.
Harvey Weinstein has been hit with new criminal charges as the disgraced movie producer gears up for a possible retrial. His 2020 rape conviction was overturned in April after a judge allowed testimony from accusers not formally involved in the case. Prosecutors in Manhattan are now investigating new sexual assault claims as more women come forward through the specifics have not been disclosed at court. He continues to deny all allegations. The UK's Crime Ministers had her belongings stolen from the hotel where she gave a speech to members of the Police Superintendents Association. In her conference speech, Dame Diana Johnson said the Labour government had inherited an epidemic of antisocial behaviour, theft and shoplifting from the government before. Warwickshire Police are investigating the theft and the Home Office confirmed there were no security risks identified. A 17-year-old boy has been arrested as a part of an investigation into a cyber attack on London transport. The National Crime Agency says the teenager was detained on suspicion of offences under the Computer Misuse Act. It comes as TfL says some customer names and contact details have been compromised in the security breach, which started on the 1st of September. Some Oyster card data may also have been accessed, which could include bank account details. Ukraine has called on the UK and the US to lift restrictions on using Western weapons against Russian targets during a visit by the Foreign Secretary and the US Secretary of State. At a press conference in Kyiv, David Lammy and Antony Blinken praised Ukraine's bravery, but avoided committing to President Zelensky's request to use long-range missiles for strikes inside of Russia. Discussions will continue in Washington on Friday. And a Royal Navy warship has seized £160 million worth of cocaine in the Caribbean, intercepting a so-called narco sub in a joint operation with the United States. HMS Trent, sailing around 200 miles south of the Dominican Republic, seized 2,000 kilos of cocaine, marking the ship's 8th drug bust in only 7 months. And in a sign that major changes could be ahead for the UK's workforce, health and care work visas applications have plunged by 83% from April to August this year. New figures from the Home Office reveal dependent visa applications also dropped by 73%. Meanwhile, student visas saw a 17% drop, but the dependents of students took a sharper hit with 83% decline. In contrast, applications for skilled worker visas rose by 18% over the same period. And taking space exploration to new heights, 2 civilians just completed the first ever commercial spacewalk. Billionaire Jared Isaacman and crewmate Sarah Gillis floated out their SpaceX Dragon capsule 400 miles above Earth using experimental spacesuits. Without the usual safety of an airlock, the daring duo tested life support systems in the vacuum of space. The privately funded missions made them the first to take a cosmic stroll without being professional astronauts. Now, those are your latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Lewis. Superb stuff. Now, the NHS, it must reform or die. Well, following a shocking report by former Labour Health Minister Lord Darzi describing the state of the NHS as dire and in critical condition, the Prime Minister earlier on today claimed that the National Health Surgery needs major surgery.
NHS may be in a critical condition, but its vital signs are strong. And we need to have the courage to deliver long-term reform. Major surgery, not sticking plasters.
Well, major surgery is required, and the report finds that failings in the care has led to the deaths of thousands of patients each year. And I'm joined now by GB News' political correspondent, Olivia Utley, to talk about this further. Olivia, welcome back to the show. So the figures are stark. The total budget going into the NHS, almost £180 billion last year, Utley. £180 billion going in, and yet we see record waiting lists, people complaining of plummeting standards of care. There's been talk for many, many years of major reform of the health service. The Tory party didn't do it. Nigel Farage has spoken of his desire to do it, and fair play to Keir Starmer. He's grabbing the bull by the horns.
Yes, very bullish rhetoric from Keir Starmer this morning on reforming the NHS. He even went as far as to say that there will be no more money without reform. And the figures, as you say, Martin, really back him up there. It's often said these days that Britain is becoming an NHS with a country attached. That's how much of taxpayer money is ploughed into the NHS. And as you mentioned, it doesn't seem to be improving services very much. The number of people working in the NHS increased by 17% between 2012 and 2019, but that did not correspond with an uptick in the number of appointments or, of course, shorter waiting lists. In fact, waiting lists have been getting longer year on year. So what is Keir Starmer going to do about it? Well, he talks about a 10-year plan. He talks about getting scans onto the high streets and out of hospitals. He talks about prevention instead of treatment. All of that sounds quite familiar. It's something which Conservative ministers have mentioned many, many times over the last 14 years. Labour is hopeful that it will be able to seize the nettle, as you put it, partly because they have this mandate. They do have the largest majority for over a decade now. And also, although they don't quite say this, reforming the NHS is less of a toxic issue politically for Labour than it is for the Conservatives. When the Conservatives talk about NHS reform, you get the Jeremy Corbyns of the world suggesting that the Conservatives are simply trying to privatise the NHS, to try and put money in the pockets of their friends and cronies. That isn't such an accusation that is levelled at Labour. So Keir Starmer is optimistic. There are going to be hurdles, though, and one of those hurdles is the BMA, the main doctors' union. Whenever there is talk about productivity reform and personnel reform in the NHS, which the statistics show is what is so desperately needed, the BMA puts up a bit of a fuss. I asked Keir Starmer that very question a little bit earlier today. Let's hear what he had to say.
Professor John Bell said this morning that doctors in the BMA have been a major drag on reforming healthcare. Do you predict that the BMA will now embrace productivity reform with open arms?
Well, look, I've said we'll do this with the staff, and we will. But I know from my old job running the Crown Prosecution Service that whenever you try to reform anything, there will be some people, I'm afraid, who will say, oh, don't do that, it's better as it is, I wouldn't do that. Keep things as they are. We have to take that attitude on, in my view. It's an inhibitor of change. So whilst we say we will do it with people, and we will, do it together, and we will, I know in my heart of hearts we will meet pockets of people who will say, don't do it, slow down, go over there, not over there, leave things as they are. We have to take that on, and we will take that on. That's part and parcel of the change that we need to bring about. Thank you.
So the Prime Minister there sounding as though he is perfectly happy to pick a fight with the unions, if you like, or at least is braced for a fight with the BMA. But let's see what happens when push actually comes to shove. The Keir Starmer and the Labour government have just given junior doctors a pretty big pay rise in order, in part, to placate the BMA. Could we find something similar happening when Keir Starmer tries to begin those NHS reforms he's been talking about today?
Olivia Utley, I think you asked an excellent question indeed. The BMA's GP committee has already said that it would have no choice but to participate in collective action. So I think you're dead right to point out this won't be an easy route ahead for Sir Keir Starmer. Thank you very much, Olivia Utley. Great reporting as ever. Now, joining us now to continue this conversation is the oncologist, Professor Carol Sikora. Professor Sikora, the common sense oncologist, thank you so much for joining us. Now, you've been calling for NHS reform for absolutely ages. In fact, back in May, you appeared on my show saying reform is desperately needed. You had a 6-point plan on how to deal with this. You know the NHS, you know its deficiencies. How can we sort this? And do you think Sir Keir Starmer has the appetite to do this? And will he hit lots of resistance from GPs and the health service as he tries to do so?
You're right about all this, Martin. The problem is there's nothing new in this report. We've had report after report showing things are getting worse year on year. More money, more staff, no productivity. It's not new news, as you all know. The problem is there's nothing about how to fix it in this report. After all, this guy that wrote it was a health minister 14 years ago or so. Why ask him to do it? He never did anything to make it change. That's why we're in the mess. The current governments have this theme of criticising the previous government for the state of the NHS, but no one has any ideas about how to fix it. That's what's needed. It requires unpleasant ideas like charging people for services in the NHS, charging for priority care if people want to buy it, like you can go business class on airlines. All these things have to be discussed. There's no point sticking to the same old thing that Bevan came up with 70 years ago, free at the point of delivery, based on medical need, not on ability to pay. That doesn't work in modern society. Something's got to give. You know, I've been in it for over 50 years now, and, you know, it's got progressively worse. And I think that's the problem, Martin.
So, on that point, Professor Sakura, what happens? Sir Keir Starmer has echoed things that you've been saying for a long time. We have to fix the plumbing before turning on the taps. No more money without reform. But it's a common metaphor of the NHS is a leaky bucket. Money leaks out because they seem to be terrible at spending money. They don't seem to have the business acumen of the private sector. So, with so many huge issues to face, where do we start?
Exactly. And what does reform mean? And this is a great word, reform. It's a magic word. It'll change everything. It'll make it free and you can have more for less money. It doesn't work like that. We all know that. Nothing in society works like that. Reform requires hard choices. It requires a much more business-like approach to making efficiency. The BMA will rattle in its cage about this, as you've heard, and the other unions will do the same. Appeasing the junior doctors, well, maybe that was the right decision at the time, but I predict they'll be on strike before Christmas again for more money. That's the problem. We're in a never-ending cycle. When I began, Martin, in the NHS, it was really fun. It was just such fun to be a junior doctor, a privilege, and to be a young consultant, again, a privilege. And we didn't count the costs. We didn't need to. But now we do have to count the costs. It's just so expensive. My specialty, cancer, we have drugs that cost over £150,000 a year to give to someone. And that someone may be over 80. They've not paid the kind of insurance policy to justify giving that drug to them. But we have to do it. And maybe that's fair. But we have to come with much more imaginative solutions if we're going to...
Sakura, they should really plumb into you and get your expertise. Every time you come on, you see absolute common sense. Thank you. Pleasure to speak to you as ever. And you were magnificent during lockdowns. And isn't that a part of the problem about how we're so far in debt with the national state and the NHS? Oncologist Carol Sakura, an absolute delight to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining me on the show. They get lots more on that story on our website. And thanks to you, GBNews.com is the fastest growing national news website in the country. It's got breaking news and all of the brilliant analysis that you've come to expect from us here at GB News. Now, it's time now for the Great British Giveaway and the biggest cash prize we've ever given away. That's right, 36 grand could be yours, and that's like having an extra £3,000 tax-free in your bank account each and every month for an entire year. That sounds tasty. Well, here's all the details you need to make it yours.
08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
So coming up next, we're talking about the winter fuel allowance, the huge backlash across the nation as 438 Labour MPs voted to kill that winter fuel allowance off. Could there be a political backlash? I'll be discussing that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
So, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, are non-crime hate incidents a breach of your human rights?
It's crazy, isn't it? Freedom of speech is now on life support here, and we've had, in the last week alone, we've had Elon Musk being threatened. He's now out of Brazil with X. We've had the founder of Telegram basically being arrested, and he's been charged in France. We're not quite sure the circumstances why he was there, whether Macron invited him to the Olympics or whatever, but he's been arrested under several charges. And we've had all sorts of people who've been speaking out are basically being shut down. So it has to be freedom of thought. It has to be freedom of expression. It's one of our fundamental rights under the Human Rights Act of 1998. Article 10 gives you the right to express your opinion and also to air that publicly.
It's basically I say something that somebody doesn't like, so probably one of my monologues. Then somebody can then inform the police that I've upset them in some way. And then that goes on my record, so I now have a criminal record. Yes. Because somebody else who I've never met met, who's never met me, has heard something that upset or hurt his feelings, then if I go for a certain job or I go for my DBS check, which I do regularly because I go and talk in schools, somebody could pull that up and go, well, you did something that had hurty feelings, and so now you can't have that job. That has got to be a breach of my human rights.
Oh, absolutely. Article 10, it's a fundamental right to protect your freedom of speech and so on and so forth. And this is what's really worrying, because it's happening around the world, as I say, in Brazil, in France, in various other countries. In America, you know, Zuckerberg, he came out in the last few days and said the pressure that he was put under by the Biden administration, first of all about COVID, and even jokes he was told to suppress them. The other thing that he was saying about the Hunter Biden laptop. And he said he couldn't speak about that because they were telling him not to. And what he did, he had to fact check, and he turned around and said he regretted that, because the reality is you're working on that sort of basis.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:21. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, we are now joined by the former Labour Party MP Stephen Pound to talk about the winter fuel allowance vote this week. Of course, 438 Labour MPs voted to scrap the winter fuel allowance, the £300 allowance for 10 million British pensioners. Now, every single person who voted to scrap this, every single member of Parliament, was a Labour member of Parliament. 438 out of 438. There were 53 abstentions, and the great majority of them were also the Labour Party. And I'm joined now by the former Labour MP, Stephen Pound. Stephen Pound, always a pleasure to have you on the show. First of all, I want to ask you a direct question. You're a former Labour Party MP. If you'd been voting in Westminster on this, how would you have voted?
I would have voted along the same lines as Kemi Badenoch did if she had any courage. I would have said it's ridiculous that the King gets the same winter fuel allowance as somebody who's on the breadline. As far as I'm concerned, I would have voted absolutely to scrap this, because as a pensioner, I want to see money sent into the National Health Service, into security, into the policing, into our armed forces. I don't want it to be given to millionaires who don't need it in the first place. There's not enough money in this country to spray it around like a matlow on shore leave. As far as I'm concerned, what money we've got should be targeted at those people. The King and I can do without it. The NHS can't do without it.
Stephen Pound, as you know, that's a gross oversimplification of the matter. There are many, many people that have been in touch with us here at GB News who might be £1 or £2 even over that threshold, who are going to be suffered. To make out that everybody's like the King or a millionaire, you know, isn't true. And do you think, therefore, that that's your attitude there and the way that's come across from the Labour Party? This is mean-spirited, it's cruel, and could it haunt your party at the next election?
Martin, it's very easy to be generous with other people's money. The Labour Party doesn't have any money. The country has money. The money is not our money, and we have to spend it responsibly. Now, look, when you say there's a few people who are just simply on the edge of getting it, well, that would apply if we were giving people £500 a year. There would always be somebody, there'd always be a trigger point, which is why I think, maybe we could be a bit more sensitive about a taper. But look, the reality is you've got a thing called the Warms Home Discount, which kicks in October. We've got the considerable increase in pensions. And as far as I'm concerned, you may accuse me of being grossly simplistic, and I actually take that on the chin, because I can understand where you're coming from. But the reality is you have to have targeted benefits. A couple of years ago, we had a debate in the House of Commons on the TV licence. Up until then, everybody over 75 got a free BBC TV licence, whether they wanted it or not. The Conservative government then said it is ridiculous to give everybody a free TV licence. What we're going to do is we're going to target it only at those on benefits. And the Conservative government proposed that. I agreed with it and we voted for it. As far as I'm concerned, it's the same principle. You've got to target at those most in need and not give it to those who don't need it so much.
OK, just talk through the map we just had on our screen. That's a map that I've put together. You can see on there the red seats, and they're all Labour. They're the seats that voted to scrap, to kill the tax, the winter fuel allowance. And the green constituencies, those are the ones that voted to keep it. And the ambers, they're the abstentions. They're mostly Labour Party on the mainland, with a few Sinn Féins there in Northern Ireland. Now, when you dive into the detail of this, Stephen Pound, there are some fascinating figures leap out. Some of these Labour seats have very, very small majorities. In fact, the smallest majority there is Hendon. Hendon has a 15 majority, 1-5. However, almost 12,000 people in that constituency lost their winter fuel allowance. Same in Poole, 18 majority. Nearly 19,000 people lost their winter fuel allowance. Cambridge, 39 versus 17,000 who lost their winter fuel allowance. Stephen Pound, if you're a parliamentarian in one of those seats, would you not be concerned with such a tiny minority, tiny majority, that even a tiny proportion of those who lost their winter fuel allowance voting a different way will wipe those Labour seats out?
Martin, I would hope that I would have had the courage and the guts and the honesty to actually look my constituents in the eye and say, look, I'm not in the business of making stupid gesture politics. I'm not in the business of voting against something which I know is going to go through. What I'm in the business of is doing the best for the country. Country first, party second. And as far as I'm
pensioners
concerned,
last.
First.
And pensioners last.
No, not at all. Look, pensioners are going to get an increase in the pension allowance anyway, in the minimum income guarantee. Look, when these things, I mean, Ted Heath brought in the £10 Christmas bonus back in whenever it was, 74, and at that time we thought, that is just a gesture. I mean, is that £10 really important? Does it make a huge amount of difference? When Gordon Brown brought in the winter fuel allowance back in when I think it was 1998, 99, a number of people said, look, do we really need this? It's the best thing. At that time, the country was in a better state financially. It's very, very easy to actually strike a posture and say, I'm going to vote against this, I'm going to vote to, make some shy baby thing about pensioners, come out. As soon as somebody comes up with that old, eating or heating line, they've lost the argument. Look, we've got to be sensible, we've got to be grown up, we've got to give it to those in the greatest need. The people, when I got the winter fuel allowance, I gave it straight to the Salvation Army. I didn't need it. I would much rather it would go to people in greater need. And that's the honesty of it, Martin. Look, and you say, what would I have done to my constituents? I would have actually sat down and spoken to them. And I would say, yeah, of course, I can make a brave gesture and stand on a hill and wave a flag and hope that I'm being noble and you're going to love me forever. But being elected politician means being grown up, being sensible, it means adult. And above all, mate, it means treating the constituents and the people of this country with the respect they deserve, not trying to fool them that there's a magic money tree that can provide everything for everybody every day of the week.
Except, Stephen Pound, there was a magic money tree. £10 billion went to public sector workers with 5.5% inflation-busting pay rise. Sir Keir Starmer sorted out people in the unions, the health unions, the teacher unions. We found £600 million yesterday for Ukraine, £100 million for train drivers, £500 million for junior doctors, £11.6 billion for climate aid overseas. The Labour Party can find the money for that. This was £1.4 billion, Stephen Pound. In the grand scheme of things, it was a pittance, it was a frippery, and yet you know full well it has a highly emotional impact, cutting things like this. It says Ukraine first, climate change first, pensioners last. A lot of people are getting in touch with GB News. They've been saying that to us. They feel this country no longer cares about old age pensioners who've paid into the system for their entire lives.
Martin, that money is going to go to the things that every pensioner in this country holds dear and holds priceless to their heart. Security, the policing, prisons, all those things, the NHS above all. Pensioners don't exist purely on a little island. They have to actually take advantage of other things. That money that we can save by targeting the winter fuel allowance can go to something that every single pensioner needs. A better health service, more police on the streets, more security. And as for Ukraine is an existential threat. If we can't do something about the Russians, we can't do anything about our own future. And it's not nearly that amount of money. We wouldn't have had the money to actually spend on those things if we weren't being grown up and sensible about things like the winter fuel allowance. As for the other things, we've not bought off the unions. I wish to God we had bought off the unions. They've come back with a bolt over and over again. These are long-standing strikes that have been settled, long-standing industrial disputes that have had to be settled for the good of every single person in this country. Look, you can say that one particular group of people, the pensioners, who by and large, and there's plenty of examples of people who are in dire poverty, and those are the people we need to address. We need to get them the benefits that they're entitled to get them the proper allowances that they can. Then they can get their winter fuel allowance. And I get back to the point. You accuse me of gross simplification. You're a good journalist, and I respect you for this. To say that the King and I don't need it is not gross simplification. It's a statement of fact.
No, but I'm saying not everybody is the King or you. You've probably got a nice parliamentarian's pension, so you don't need the winter fuel allowance. And can I quickly ask you this question as well? If it's about looking your constituents in the eyes, why did 50 Labour MPs not even have the guts to vote? They abstained.
Well, those 50 Labour, just go down the list. A lot of them, people like Hilary Benn, who was on duty in Northern Ireland at the time. They were like David Lammy, who was in Ukraine. A lot of those people simply couldn't be there.
Yeah, one of them was at the dentist. Yeah, the MP for Liverpool was at the dentist. Yeah, that must come as great comfort to the pensioners of the kingdom. OK, Stephen Pound, thank you very much for joining us on the show. I'm putting up a spirited defence of what many think is a heartless cut, but still, we have a nice balanced debate on this show. Now, lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including the UK's Police and Crime Minister had her purse stolen at an annual conference for senior police officers on Tuesday. Is this a reflection of the state of our country? Even the coppers can't keep their purses from getting nicked. But first, here's your latest news headlines, and it's Lewis Mackenzie.
Good afternoon. It's 5:30. I'm Lewis Mackenzie in the GB newsroom. Sir Keir Starmer says the NHS is broken but not beaten, delivering a stark message after a damning report into the health service. The review highlights ballooning waiting times, long A&E delays and poor cancer care. Speaking earlier, the Prime Minister warned there will be no more money without reform and said big shifts are needed to secure the NHS's future.
Only fundamental reform and a plan for the long term can turn around the NHS and build a healthy society. Now, it won't be easy, it won't be quick, it will take a 10-year plan, not just the work of one Parliament, but I know we can do it.
The UK's crime ministers had her belongings stolen from a hotel where she was giving a speech to members of the Police Superintendents Association. In her conference speech, Dame Diana Johnson says the Labour government has inherited an epidemic of antisocial behaviour, theft and shoplifting from the Conservative government. Warwickshire Police are investigating the theft and the Home Office confirmed no security risks were identified. Harvey Weinstein has been hit with new criminal charges as the disgraced movie producer gears up for a possible retrial. His 2020 rape conviction was overturned in April after a judge allowed testimony from accusers not formally involved in the case. Prosecutors in Manhattan are now investigating new sexual assault claims as more women come forward. He continues to deny all allegations. A 17-year-old boy has been arrested as a part of an investigation into a cyber attack on Transport for London. The National Crime Agency says the teenager was detained on suspicion of offences under the Computer Misuse Act. It comes as TfL said some customers' names and contact details had been compromised in the security breach, which started on the 1st of September. Some Oyster card data may also have been accessed, which could include bank account details. And taking space exploration to new heights, two civilians just completed the first ever commercial spacewalk. Billionaire Jared Isaacman and crewmate Sarah Gillis have completed the first ever commercial spacewalk. The pair floated out from their SpaceX Dragon capsule 400 miles above the Earth using experimental spacesuits. The privately funded missions made them the first ever people to take a cosmic stroll without being professional astronauts. Well, those are your latest GB News headlines. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Fantastic delivery there from Lewis Mackenzie. Now, if you want to get in touch with me here at GB News, you know what to do. Go to gbnews.com/your says. There's been a huge response to the interview I just did with Stephen Pound, former Labour Party Member of Parliament, saying that we should get rid of the winter fuel allowance. It was the right thing to scrap it. And then we had a bit of a ding-dong, and it certainly got you going. Get your comments coming in, and I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Business News Channel.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Still a cold feel for the next day or so, but it will turn warmer into the weekend. And it will also become much drier across western areas as high pressure is building in for the end of the week from the west. We've still got this northerly wind, though, bringing in Arctic air for many areas through this evening, as well as a few showers. Inland at first, but overnight they will become more and more restricted to just the east coast, as well as just the far north coast of parts of Wales too. Some of these showers across the east could still be heavy into this evening and bring a risk of hail, but for many of us, it is going to be a clear, dry and cold night tonight. Rurally, we could be down as low as -1 or 2 quite widely. And where we have seen some snow across the high ground in Scotland, we could be down lower than that first thing. But there will be plenty of sunshine in the morning. So despite the chilly start, the sunshine should still warm things up quite quickly. And the winds will be much lighter through tomorrow morning, so quite a pleasant start to the day. Across the northwest, though, parts of western Scotland, Northern Ireland, we will start to see some cloud bubbling up through the morning and a risk of a few showers. That is ahead of a weather front that is going to be spreading in from the northwest through Friday afternoon. You can see it here. So rain approaching parts of Northern Ireland later on in the day. And the sunshine will turn much hazier across parts of Scotland. Elsewhere, though, plenty of long-lived sunshine. And with lighter winds, it will feel much warmer tomorrow compared to today. Temperatures will still be a little below average in the mid-teens for most areas, highs of 17 degrees at a max in the far southeast, but it's certainly warmer than it has been lately. Now, the rain across the northwest continues its journey into parts of Scotland through Friday evening. That'll become a bigger feature as we head into Saturday, so rainfall totals could start to build up across far northwestern areas, whereas dry weather will hold on across the south. And as we look ahead to the start of next week, further wet weather in the north, but more dry and warm weather in the south.
The latest GB News travel.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Johnny Rann. Problems in County Durham on the A1M. The motorway's down to a single lane southbound at junction 61, the Bowburn exit, where emergency bridge repair works are taking place. On the M56 in Greater Manchester, there are westbound queues from junctions 6 to 7 between Hale and Bowden. It was temporarily held the motorway following an accident involving a car. All restrictions were lifted about 10 minutes ago, but it's still really slow. On the M40 in Warwickshire, and the inside lanes closed northbound between the Warwick services and junction 30 in Bishop's Tatsbrook, where recovery work is taking place following an accident involving a lorry and a van. Long queues on the clockwise M25 on the western stretch after an earlier crash just after the M40, and on the M4 eastbound north of Cardiff, a lane is closed after a car overturned 32 to 30 near to the Corriton interchange. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 5:38. We're on the final furlong with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News. Now, the UK's Police and Crime Minister, Dame Diana Johnson, has had her purse stolen at an annual conference for senior police officers on Tuesday. She gave a speech warning of the epidemic of antisocial behaviour, theft and shoplifting that the Labour government had inherited from the Conservatives. Well, the theft came on the same day that the government released prisoners to deal with overcrowding. And to discuss this farcical situation, I'm now joined by the former Minister of State for Crime Prevention, Norman Baker. Norm, always a pleasure. This would be a Morecambe and Wise sketch if it weren't so serious. Here we are at a police conference. The Police and Crime Commissioner gets her own purse nicked. Norman, it sums up the state we're in.
It does, rather, and if she's got the same title as I had, she's a Minister for Crime Prevention, which she hasn't managed to do on this particular occasion. So it's clearly embarrassing for her. It's embarrassing for the police. She was addressing a conference of senior police officers, and someone, some cheeky chappie somewhere, has decided to nick her purse from the hotel in which the conference was taking place. But it does indicate as I say, how embarrassing it is. But also, I don't know whether the police will pursue this matter because, as you know, Martin, low-level crime has effectively been decriminalised in recent times. The idea of the police pursuing the theft of a purse strikes me as unlikely.
You're absolutely right. I mean, they don't bother going after people who steal less than 200 quid's worth of stuff from shops. Anybody who gets their phone stolen will tell you all you get now is a crime reference number for your insurance. If you get your house broken into, you're looking to see a copper within the next 48 hours. Is this a case, Norman, of simply you reap what you sow? Even police top brass aren't immune from petty theft now being the new normal.
Well, I hope it drives home to both the government and indeed the police that a crime is a crime and it should be pursued. There should no longer be any crimes which are effectively free for the criminal. If they are crimes, they should be pursued. If they're not crimes, they should be removed from the statute book. It's quite as simple as that. And I hope that we do take things like theft more seriously. It's unfair, for example, on our shopkeepers that shoplifting is effectively decriminalised and people can go in and take what they want and are unlikely to get any repercussions. And if the shopkeeper, of course, attempts to stop them, they can get arrested for assault.
And Norman, could I ask you for your opinion? Sir Keir Starmer said that he was troubled by the images of inmates who were released from Nick this week popping champagne corks. One was picked up in a Lamborghini. Some were doing the Lambeth Walk, dancing around the streets. Some were given drugs on their exit from prison. What does that say to the British population looking on at these scenes that just seem to reflect a society where early releases reward and law-abiding people living in fear of these yobbos getting back out?
Well, I mean, look, that's another thing that's very embarrassing, probably more embarrassing for the government than the theft of Diana Johnson's purse. It is a very poor image. I don't actually blame the government in this situation because we have a situation where prisons are at capacity. They inherited that from the last government. The last government was actually thinking about a similar scheme because of the pressure on the prisons. However, it does suggest that the criminals stick two fingers up, frankly, to the law and order in this country, and it's unedifying to see those sorts of scenes. I very much hope that we'll end up with a situation where, first of all, people who shouldn't be in prison because, for example, not paying a television licence or something, are dealt with in different ways, but those who are in prison for serious offences should not be released at 40% of sentence. That's not right.
Okay, Norman Baker, thanks for joining us there, the former Minister of State for Crime Prevention. Now, you've got your phone on a table there in London. That's the crime waiting to happen. Make sure you get it back in your pocket. Sharpish. Norman Baker, always a pleasure speaking to you on the show. Now, coming up, sentencing takes place tomorrow in Sheffield following a 5-year investigation by officers from the National Crime Agency into the grooming gangs in Rotherham. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Janis Joplin shot to fame in 1967, but after releasing 3 albums, she was dead 3 years later at the age of 27, having overdosed on heroin.
Yes, very, very brief life, but towering influence. People like Pink in the modern day have said that she is the influence. But she was around so briefly, I guess, burned very brightly and a very troubled soul. And what we've got is A Night with Janis Joplin, the musical. And I think a lot of the problems, it's been getting very mixed reviews, and I think the problem is with this subtitle, the musical. That does it no justice at all. Really? It's staggering, stunning in an audience. So what we have is A Night with. It's as if she's in concert. She's sitting on the stage, she's swinging from a bottle, and she's singing and giving us little memories thoughts on life?
I think I see where you're going, because some critics have said it's a fantastic individual performance that sits in an empty vessel of a show.
Yeah.
And you're saying that that's because the expectations of what the show is have been wrong.
Yes, I agree. And I do think that it's obviously a very loving show. There's very little reference to drugs. There's a bit of a throwaway comment. So we don't really look at the demons. What we do is we explore womanhood very powerfully, but also the blues.
How long do we have to see this?
This one it's on until September the 28th. It's on at the Peacock, which is just down by Aldwych in
Quite
London.
a small auditorium, actually.
No, it's a big auditorium. So the Peacock is it's a bit of a barn of a room. And again, I would say this show might be better in a slightly smaller venue, but I cannot recommend the performances highly enough.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:46. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. A 5-year investigation by officers from the National Crime Agency into child sex abuse offences against teenage girls in Rotherham in the early 2000s is set to conclude tomorrow. And I'm joined now by our national reporter, Charlie Peters, who's outside Sheffield Crown Court. Charlie Peters, a very, very emotional days of evidence today. You were inside the courtroom as two of those survivors gave their victim impact statements. Astonishing testimony given. Charlie Peters, tell us more.
Well, after a 20-year wait for justice, a 5-year-long investigation and a 9-week-long trial, today was the opportunity for those victims to give their impact statements, to tell the defendants directly how their actions had impacted them. Well, earlier this afternoon at Sheffield Crown Court, those 7 defendants arrived and sat in the dock. One required an Urdu interpreter as the lead prosecutor in this case, a barrister called Nicholas Lumley, set out a summary of what the court had heard earlier in the year after they were convicted for a string of child sexual offences in June of this year. He said that the complainants were preyed upon by the men. Each of them, he said, were engaging in grooming and had aggressively forced the victims to engage in sexual activities. He said that the defendants denied the acts. They also denied knowing the complainants. Some of them made that move in the trial. That meant that both of the survivors had to be cross-examined during the trial. He also recounted how each of the survivors during that investigation also had to pick out the defendants in a defendant and a perpetrator process. So that, he said, had extended the suffering that they had experienced as part of this harrowing and appalling ordeal. Now, much of the abuse related to this trial and this case took place in the mid-2000s, from 2003 to 2008. Now, the complainants were aged just 11 and 15 at the start of the abuse, and the court heard that the NCA investigation established that some of the abuse took place in a car park, in supermarket car parks, in a cemetery, and in one shocking case, even by a nursery where primary school children were being looked after. Now, during this trial, we heard about the impact that the abuse had on the complainants, but today they had the opportunity to put that forward to the defendants themselves, who sat in the dock as one of the survivors stood up and addressed them directly, reading her victim impact statement. She detailed how one of them had forced her to take a virginity test at the age of 11. They said that virginity was disgusting. She described how she had been abused and raped by over 150 men by the time she turned 16. She talked about the campaign of violence that she experienced, the trafficking throughout England from Rotherham, where she was based, how her phone was taken away, threatened with violence, subjected to sexual acts and rapes from the ages of 11 to 16. And in her statement, she said, "I don't want to give you too much of my time. You've already had all of my childhood and the majority of my adulthood. For years, I've suffered and still do with flashbacks." She said that she sometimes gets a whiff of one of her abuser's smells, and sometimes she still hears their laughs. "I wake up screaming from nightmares, even when I'm highly medicated. This still happens." Just a portion of some of the suffering that she detailed in the court in an extremely emotively charged delivery. She said, "You ruined my life, but I won't let you ruin my future. I'm a fighter and a survivor. I am thriving and I am fighting. You can't and won't take anything from me ever again." She continued, 22 years ago, you started to groom me. 10 years ago, I started my campaign for justice. You stole my childhood. Now I'm taking your freedom. I am your karma. She delivered those words as looking directly at all 7 defendants, all of them who avoided to return her eye contact, many of them staring down at the floor or up towards the public gallery that was packed with their family members. Now, those 7 defendants who will be sentenced tomorrow for a string of child sexual offences are Mohammed Amar, age 42, Yasser Ajayib, 39, Mohammed Zamir Sadiq, 49, Mohammed Siab, 49, Abid Sadiq, 43, Tahir Yassin, 38, and Ramin Bari. Now, after that first survivor gave her direct victim impact statement, there was a brief pause before the second impact statement was read out by one of the prosecuting barristers, while that other survivor watched on through a video link in a separate courtroom. She said, "Your actions, which briefly satisfied your desires, have had a lifelong effect on me. I am a survivor and I am a fighter. I will continue to be strong and continue to seek justice. I am now in control of my life." She closed by saying, "You violated and humiliated me when I was a vulnerable child. Now it's your turn to feel as I did." Again, as those statements delivered by one of the prosecuting barristers, all of the men in the dock looking away, either at the ground, at each other, or at their families. Visible signs of emotion from within the dock was seen, and the only other thing that was heard while those deliveries were made by the victim and by the prosecuting barrister was the translation into Urdu. Otherwise, it was a silent and emotionally charged courtroom. They will be sentenced tomorrow, all 7 of those defendants, and the judge here, His Honour Judge Michael Slater, said that they could expect lengthy custodial sentences. We did have mitigating statements made by all 7 defence barristers, but they all conceded that they were under no illusions as to what will happen here tomorrow morning.
Troy Peters, it's a very, very difficult thing to listen to. It must have been even harder for those astonishing survivors to have read out that face-to-face, looking them in the eye, their abusers in the eye. Troy Peters, you were there. Do you think this is finally going to help those amazing young women find resolution?
Yes, I think they very much appreciate the opportunity to deliver those victim impact statements. And I've spoken to several other survivors from the Rotherham abuse scandal who have had this opportunity to deliver them in court. Of course, they don't need to take them themselves. Many of them do not want to see their abusers ever again. But it has been delivered in these Operation Stovewood trials. That's the name of the operation that the National Crime Agency launched in 2018. It's secured now well over 38 convictions, over 250 arrests. They've also identified some 1,150 victims, all of whom they have tried to contact, understandably, because many of these girls and boys were let down so severely by the authorities at the height of the abuse from 1997 to 2013. Not all of them have cooperated with the NCA, but it's undoubtedly the case that the NCA, Britain's FBI, has made a significant impact in securing justice for those victims.
Charlie Peters, thank you for that harrowing but vital report, and I pray they get the resolution and peace they deserve tomorrow at that trial sentencing. Thank you very much, Charlie Peters there from Sheffield Crown Court. That's a harrowing way to end the show, but I think you agree their stories must be told. Up next is Jubes & Co. But first, here's your weather. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. Still a cold feel for the next day or so, but it will turn warmer into the weekend. And it will also become much drier across western areas as high pressure is building in for the end